Hello, friends. Welcome to the Sleep Aliens. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. Have you ever used the same stretch of highway so often that you started to ignore everything around you? That's exactly what happened to Seth Caro. Arizona State Route 85, the road stretching south from Gila Bend toward the Mexican border. Once I used it, it felt like I'd used it 100 times. The Border Patrol agent was in his 7th year on the job. He was the kind of man who knew every mile marker, every rest stop, every spot favored by illegal immigrants. August 14, 2019. Thursday night. Even though it was past 11, the temperature was still around 93 degrees. Seth had left his window open, his arm propped against the door, scanning the desert on both sides of the 2-lane asphalt road. Aside from creosote bushes and saguaro silhouettes, the sky was clear enough to see the Milky Way. His radio crackled. "Unit 7, this is dispatch. You copy?" Seth grabbed the handset. "Go ahead, dispatch. We've got a sensor ping at marker 47. Can you swing by and check it out?" "Copy that. I'm about 6 miles north. Be there in 10. Sensor pings were routine. Usually coyotes. The animal kind, not the human smuggler kind, though sometimes both. Seth accelerated slightly, watching the mile markers tick by in his headlights. 45, 46, 47. He slowed, pulling onto the shoulder. Killed the engine. The desert went silent except for the ticking of hot metal cooling down. Seth grabbed his flashlight, stepped out into the heat. The air smelled like dust and creosote. He swept his beam across the landscape, looking for movement, fresh tracks, anything out of place. That's when he saw them. 2 lights, pure white, hanging in the air about half a mile south, maybe 200 feet up. Perfectly still, no movement at all. Seth's first thought was aircraft, maybe a helicopter with searchlights. But there was no sound, not even a whisper. The desert at night carried sound for miles. If there was a helicopter out there, he'd hear it. He stared at the lights for maybe 30 seconds. They didn't move, didn't pulse. Just hung there like someone had nailed 2 spotlights to the sky. Seth reached for his radio. "Dispatch Unit 7, I'm at marker 47. I've got eyes on something. 2 white lights, stationary, about a half mile south of my position. No sound, no movement. Can you check if we've got any air assets in this sector?" Static. Then, "Stand by, 7. The lights stayed put. Seth trained his flashlight on them even though he knew the beam wouldn't reach that far. It was instinct. Mark the target. He pulled out his phone, opened the camera app, zoomed in as far as it would go. The image was grainy, but you could make out 2 distinct points of light against the black sky. "Unit 7, dispatch, negative on air assets. Nothing scheduled for your sector tonight. Can you describe what you're seeing?" Seth kept his eyes on the lights. 2 white lights, circular, maybe 3 feet in diameter each if I'm judging the distance right. Completely stationary. No red or green nav lights, no sound. They're just sitting there. "Copy that. Hold position. I'm going to try to raise Yuma sector, see if they've got anything." "Copy." Seth leaned against his truck, arms crossed. The lights hadn't moved an inch. He'd been staring at them for 3 minutes now. His neck was starting to hurt. He grabbed a bottle of water from the cab, took a long drink, eyes never leaving those 2 points of light. His radio crackled again. But this time, the voice that came through wasn't dispatch. It was distorted, metallic, like someone had run it through a vocoder. "Unit 7, maintain Position. Seth frowned. Dispatch, say again. You're breaking up. The metallic voice continued. Visual. Contact. Confirmed. Do not approach. Dispatch, I'm not reading you clearly. Check your... The lights moved, not gradually, instantly. 1 second they were half a mile away, the next they were directly overhead. No acceleration, no travel time. Just a position change that defied physics. Seth stumbled backward, nearly dropping his radio. The lights were massive up close, each one at least 20 feet across, not 3. Pure white. No heat distortion, no engine wash, and still absolutely silent. His truck's headlights flickered. The radio in his hand went dead. No static, just silence. His phone screen went black. Seth stood there in the dark, neck craned back, staring up at 2 enormous circles of light that hovered maybe 100 feet above him. He couldn't move. Not because of fear, though there was plenty of that, but because his legs literally wouldn't respond. It was like his body had been put on pause. He could breathe, could blink. But moving? No. He tried to lift his arm, nothing. Tried to take a step, nothing. The lights stayed overhead for what felt like minutes, but could have been seconds. Time got weird, syrupy. Seth's thoughts were clear. He was thinking, this is actually happening. I'm actually seeing this. But his sense of duration had completely broken down. Then, just as suddenly as they'd appeared, the lights were gone. Not dimmed, not moved away. Just gone. Vanished, like someone flipped a switch. Seth gasped, stumbled forward, caught himself on the hood of his truck. His legs were shaking, his hands were shaking. He could move again. The truck's headlights flickered back to life. His radio squawked with static. 7, Unit 7, respond. What's your status? Seth grabbed the handset, had to try twice to key the mic because his thumb kept slipping. Dispatch, I'm here. I'm okay. 7, you went dark for 2 minutes. What happened? 2 minutes, Seth looked at his watch. 11:47 p.m. But the last time he'd checked, right before the lights moved, it had been 11:42. He'd lost 5 minutes, not 2. The lights moved. They were right over me. Then they vanished. Copy that. Are you injured? Do you need assistance? Negative, I'm fine. Just give me a minute. Seth walked around his truck, checking his equipment. Everything seemed normal. Radio working, lights working, engine starting up fine when he tried it. He pulled up the dashcam footage on the little screen mounted near his rearview mirror, scrolled back to 11:40 p.m. The video showed him pulling over, getting out, standing there with his flashlight. Then, at 11:42, the screen went completely black. No static, no distortion, just solid black. It stayed that way until 11:47, when the image snapped back. Seth stumbling against the hood, clearly shaken. 5 minutes of nothing. 5 minutes erased. He sat in his truck for another 20 minutes, filing his report over the radio, knowing how it sounded. Knowing dispatch was probably exchanging glances back at the station. But he told it exactly as it happened, because that's what you do. You report what you see. What Seth didn't report, because he didn't realize it until later, was the mark on his forearm. A perfect circle, about the size of a quarter, slightly lighter than his normal skin tone. Not a burn, not a bruise, just a mark that hadn't been there before. It would fade over the next 3 weeks, but he'd photograph it, show it to exactly 3 people, and never mention it in any official report. Because some things you learn to keep to yourself. Ingrid Suarez had been a dispatcher for U.S. Customs and Border Protection for 9 years. She'd heard everything. Agents calling in pursuits, vehicle breakdowns, wildlife encounters, heat exhaustion, you name it. Nothing surprised her anymore. Until the night of September 9th, 2019. She was working the overnight shift at the IO station, monitoring communications for agents spread across 300 square miles of Sonoran desert. Quiet night. 2 agents on patrol, 1 at a checkpoint, 1 on administrative duty. Boring, the way Ingrid liked it. At 2:17 a.m., Agent Marcus Holland checked in from his position near the Cabeza Prieta Wildlife Refuge. Standard call, nothing to report, continuing patrol. Ingrid logged it, took a sip of her coffee, clicked through the sensor data on her computer screen. At 2:31 a.m., Holland's radio came alive again. "Dispatch, Unit 4, I've got a visual on something strange." Ingrid keyed her mic. "Go ahead, 4. What are you seeing?" "There's a light, orange-white, low on the horizon, maybe 2 miles west of my position. It's been sitting there for about 5 minutes, not moving." "Copy that. Checking for scheduled aircraft." Ingrid pulled up the FAA coordination log. Nothing. "Negative on aircraft 4. Could it be a vehicle? Too high up. It's maybe, 50 feet off the ground. And it's too bright. Like someone pointed a stadium light at the desert." "Can you approach for a closer look?" "That's what I'm doing now. Heading west on the access road." Ingrid marked Holland's position on her map display. She could see his GPS beacon moving slowly across the screen. "Copy. Keep me posted." 3 minutes of silence, then, "Dispatch, I'm getting closer, the light's getting bigger, I still don't hear anything, no engine sound, nothing." "Copy that." Another minute, Holland's voice came back, and Ingrid could hear the tension in it. "Okay, this is weird, the light just split. It was 1 light, now it's 2. They're side by side, maybe 30 feet apart." Ingrid leaned forward, studying the map. "Do they appear to be separate objects? I can't tell. They're too bright to make out any structure, just 2 lights floating in the... Hold on." Silence. "Unit 4, what's your status?" No response. Ingrid checked the GPS. Holland's beacon was still moving, but slowly. She keyed the mic again. "Unit 4, do you copy?" Static. Then Holland's voice came back, but it was wrong. The pitch was off, slightly higher than normal, and there was an echo, like his words were bouncing around inside a metal container. "Dispatch. Lights are directly above. Can't. 4, you're breaking up. Say again." The signal degraded further. Holland's voice became chopped, individual words separated by bursts of static. "Something wrong. Truck stopping. Unit 4, if you need assistance, key your mic twice." No response. The GPS beacon had stopped moving. Ingrid grabbed her cell phone, dialed Holland's number. Straight to voicemail. She tried again. Same thing. She keyed up the other patrol agent, Unit 9. "Unit 9, dispatch. I need you to head to Unit 4's last known position. He's gone off comms and I can't raise him." "Copy, dispatch. I'm about 20 miles east, ETA 30 minutes. Too long." Ingrid paged the agent at the checkpoint, told him to head out as backup. Then she did what protocol required. She called her supervisor. Woke him up at 2:47 a.m. to report that an agent had gone silent after reporting strange lights in the desert. She stayed on the radio, trying to raise Holland every 2 minutes. Nothing but static. His GPS beacon remained stationary. She pulled up satellite imagery of the area, but of course, it was hours old and showed nothing useful. At 3:04 a.m., Unit 9 radioed in. "Dispatch, I've got eyes on Unit 4's truck. It's pulled over on the side of the access road. Lights are on, engines running. I don't see Holland." Ingrid's stomach tightened. "Copy. Approach with caution." "I'm pulling up now. Stand by PSA." The next 60 seconds felt like an hour. Finally, "Dispatch, Holland's here. He's in the truck. He looks confused. He's asking me what happened." "Is he injured?" "Negative. He seems fine, just disoriented. He says he doesn't remember calling in about the lights. Ingrid pulled up the call log, triple-checked the timestamps. Unit 9. His last transmission was at 2:43 a.m. It's now 3:06. Does he remember anything from the past 23 minutes? A pause. Then 9's voice came back, quieter. He says the last thing he remembers is driving past marker 62. That was at 2:29. He's missing about 35 minutes. Ingrid logged every detail. When her supervisor arrived at the station 40 minutes later, she played him the recordings. They listened to Holland's voice distorting, the metallic echo, the way it degraded into something that barely sounded human. The supervisor made her write up the incident report 3 times, each time telling her to remove more details, make it sound more routine. Equipment malfunction. Possible heat exhaustion. Standard protocols followed. Nothing about missing time, nothing about the voice distortion, nothing about lights in the desert. Holland was put on administrative leave for 3 days, standard procedure for any concerning incident. When he came back, he didn't talk about it. Ingrid saw him in the break room a week later, tried to ask him what he remembered. He just shook his head, said, "I don't want to go there," and walked away. But Ingrid kept the original recording, backed it up on a thumb drive, stored it in her personal files. Sometimes, late at night when the station was quiet, she'd listen to it again. Hear Holland's voice twist and echo into something unnatural, and she'd wonder what was really out there in that desert, watching them back. Tommy Briggs had been driving 18-wheelers for 22 years. El Paso to Phoenix, Phoenix to San Diego back to El Paso. The desert circuit. He knew every truck stop, every way station, every stretch of bad road between Texas and California. October 3rd, 2019. He was hauling electronics eastbound on I-8 just past Yuma. It was 1:30 in the morning, middle of nowhere, and Tommy was starting to feel the pull of fatigue. He'd been driving since noon the previous day, only stopping for fuel and a quick burger in Gila Bend. His co-driver was asleep in the bunk behind him, snoring loud enough to rattle the curtain. Tommy reached for his coffee, cold by now, but better than nothing. And that's when he noticed the lights in his passenger side mirror. 3 of them, bright white, arranged in a triangle, following him. His first thought was another truck, but the spacing was wrong. Too wide, too low. He checked his driver's side mirror. Nothing behind him on that side. He looked at the passenger mirror again. The 3 lights were still there, maintaining the same distance. Tommy keyed his CB radio. "This is Big T eastbound on I-8. Anybody got eyes on the vehicle behind me?" Static. Then a voice. "Big T, this is Roadrunner. I'm about 2 miles ahead of you, nothing on my tail. What kind of vehicle you looking at?" That's the thing, I don't know. 3 lights, triangle pattern. Can't see the actual vehicle. Could be a custom rig, some of these kids with their LED bars. Yeah, maybe. But it didn't feel like a custom rig. The lights stayed too steady, too perfectly spaced. Tommy kept an eye on them as he drove. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. They never got closer, never fell back, just held position about 200 yards behind him. He nudged his co-driver awake. Mike, wake up. What? What's wrong?" "Check the passenger mirror. Tell me what you see." Mike sat up, rubbed his eyes, looked. 3 lights. So what? What kind of vehicle has lights arranged like that? Mike squinted. "I don't know. Airplane? No, too low. Maybe a helicopter? You hear any helicopter?" They both listened. The only sound was the diesel engine and the road noise. "Nah," Mike said. "Probably just some idiot with aftermarket lights. Why are you freaking out?" "I'm not freaking out. It's just..." Been following us for 15 minutes. Mike shrugged, lay back down. Wake me when we hit the truck stop. Within a minute, he was snoring again. Tommy kept driving. The lights stayed with him. After another 10 minutes, he decided to test something. He accelerated, pushing the truck up to 75 mph, faster than he should be going with a full load. But he wanted to see what the lights would do. They kept pace, effortlessly. He slowed down to 55. The lights slowed too, maintaining that same 200-yard gap. Tommy felt sweat starting to bead on his forehead despite the air conditioning. This wasn't right. Nothing about this was right. He grabbed his phone, held it up to the passenger window, tried to get a photo. The camera focused, snapped the picture. Tommy glanced at the screen. The image showed the dark highway, the roadside barrier, the empty desert beyond. No lights. He looked at the mirror again. The 3 lights were still there, clear as day. He deleted the failed photo, tried again. Same result. Nothing but darkness. Okay, Tommy muttered to himself. Okay, this is officially weird. He checked his fuel gauge, 3/4 full. He'd topped off in Gila Bend, which was less than 2 hours ago. Plenty of range to make it to El Centro. He thought about pulling over, letting whatever was following him pass, but something told him that was a bad idea. So he kept driving. The lights stayed behind him for another 20 minutes. Then, without any warning, they simply weren't there anymore. Tommy blinked, checked both mirrors, craned his neck to look back through the sleeper window. Nothing. The highway behind him was completely dark. He let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Jesus Christ. Mike stirred. What? Nothing. Go back to sleep. Tommy drove for another hour, checking his mirrors every 30 seconds. The lights didn't come back. By 3:30 a.m., he was pulling into the truck stop in El Centro, ready for a break. He parked, shut down the engine, sat there for a moment collecting himself. Mike climbed out of the bunk, stretched. I gotta hit the bathroom. You want anything from inside? Nah, I'm good. I'm gonna check the truck, make sure everything's secure. Mike headed inside. Tommy did his walk-around. Tires, lights, straps, all good. He was about to climb back in when he noticed something weird. His fuel gauge, which had read 3/4 full when he pulled off the highway, now showed just under half a tank. He frowned, tapped the gauge. The needle didn't move. He checked his trip computer. It showed he'd burned through way more fuel than normal for the distance traveled. Almost double. Tommy stood there in the parking lot staring at his fuel gauge, trying to make sense of it. He'd driven maybe 90 miles since Gila Bend. His rig usually got 6 miles per gallon highway driving. That meant he should have used 15 gallons, give or take. But the gauge showed he'd burned closer to 35. Unless he'd been driving for longer than he thought. Unless those 20 minutes with the lights had actually been an hour or 2 hours, and his sense of time had gotten warped somehow. He pulled out his phone, checked his call log, his text messages, anything with a timestamp. The last message he'd sent was at 1:14 a.m., right before he left Gila Bend. The next timestamp in his phone was 3:22 a.m. when he'd set it down on the dash at the truck stop. 2 hours and 8 minutes. For a 90-mile drive, that should have taken maybe an hour and 15, given his speed. Tommy stood there, phone in hand, trying to figure out where 53 minutes had gone, and why his truck had burned through twice as much fuel as it should have. He never filed a report, never told anyone except Mike, who laughed it off and said Tommy must have been more tired than he thought. Maybe dozed off without realizing it, got some highway hypnosis. But Tommy knew. He'd been wide awake. He remembered every mile of that drive, every check of the mirrors. Every moment those 3 lights had stayed locked on his tail. He just didn't remember where the missing time went. Maria Delgado worked the checkpoint at Lukeville, Arizona, the port of entry just north of the Mexican border. Graveyard shift, midnight to 8 a.m. Most nights were slow. A few truckers making early deliveries. Occasional tourists who'd timed their trip badly. Maria would check their documents, wave them through, go back to her coffee. November 17th, 2019 started like any other night. Cold for the desert. Temperature had dropped into the low 50s. Maria had her jacket zipped up, thermal mug in hand, watching the empty highway stretch north into darkness. At 2:44 a.m., her coworker Raphael came out of the booth. "You see that?" Maria looked where he was pointing. South, toward Mexico. "See what?" "Lights. There were lights moving parallel to the border, like a lot of them. Probably border patrol. That's what I thought. But they were too high up, and they were moving too fast." Maria scanned the southern horizon. Nothing but darkness and stars. "I don't see anything now." "They were there, I swear. 10, maybe 12 lights, all in a line. You want to report it?" Raphael shook his head. "And say what? I saw some lights? They're gone now anyway." They went back inside. Maria poured herself more coffee. Raphael pulled up the sensor logs on his computer. Neither of them mentioned the lights again. 20 minutes later, a semi-truck pulled up to the checkpoint, northbound from Mexico. Maria stepped out, signaled the driver to roll down his window. Mexican plates, commercial registration, everything looked normal. "Good evening. Documents, please." The driver, a heavy-set man in his 50s, handed over his paperwork. He looked nervous, but that wasn't unusual. Lots of people got anxious at border crossings, even when they had nothing to hide. Maria scanned his documents, checked the manifest. Auto parts, standard cargo. "What's your final destination?" "Tucson." "You're traveling alone?" "Yes." Something in his voice made Maria look up. The driver was staring straight ahead, both hands gripping the steering wheel. His knuckles were white. "Sir, are you feeling all right?" "I just want to get through, please." "I need to ask you some questions first. Have you been in Mexico for more than 24 hours? "No." "Are you carrying any fruits, vegetables, or agricultural products?" "No." "Any currency over $10,000? "No." Maria studied him. He still wouldn't make eye contact. "Sir, I'm going to need you to pull over to secondary inspection." "Why? I have all my papers." "Standard procedure. Please pull forward to the inspection area." The driver's jaw tightened, but he complied. Raphael came out to assist. They directed the truck into the secondary bay, had the driver step down. Standard protocol, check the cargo, scan for anomalies, make sure everything matched the manifest. Raphael climbed into the trailer while Maria questioned the driver. "How long were you at the pickup location?" 3 hours, maybe 4. "Long pickup?" "There was a delay with the paperwork." "What time did you cross from U.S. into Mexico?" "Yesterday morning, around 10. Maria did the math. That meant he'd been in Mexico for roughly 17 hours. For a pickup that should have taken 2 or 3 hours tops. "What were you doing the rest of the time?" The driver looked at her directly for the first time. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me." He hesitated, glanced around the checkpoint like he was checking for eavesdroppers. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I lost time. I was driving back to the border, taking Highway 2, and I saw lights, a whole line of them moving east to west across the desert. I pulled over to watch. I don't know why, I just did. And then I was back in my truck, engine still running, 4 hours later." Maria kept her expression neutral. 4 hours. I checked my watch. Checked my phone. I don't remember anything between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. It's just gone. Raphael emerged from the trailer. Cargo's clean, everything matches. Maria nodded, turned back to the driver. Have you consumed any alcohol or drugs tonight? No. Any medications that might cause drowsiness? No. I'm telling you. Something happened out there. I'm not crazy. Maria had been a CBP officer for 6 years. She'd heard a lot of stories. But something about the way this man said it, the genuine fear in his eyes, made her believe he at least believed what he was saying. She cleared him through, watched his taillights disappear north on Highway 85. Then she went back inside and pulled up the sensor data for the stretch of Mexican highway he'd been describing. The sensors had registered unusual activity, multiple heat signatures moving in formation across the desert, traveling at approximately 60 miles per hour. Too fast for people on foot, too coordinated for vehicles, and they'd been moving perpendicular to the border, which made no sense from a smuggling standpoint. Raphael, yeah? Those lights you saw earlier, what time was that? Around 2:30, maybe 2:40. Maria pointed at her screen. The sensors picked up something at 2:27, multiple signatures moving west to east. Raphael came over, studied the data. That's like, what, a dozen separate targets. 14. Moving in perfect formation. Yeah. They looked at each other. Raphael said what they were both thinking. We should report this. Maria pulled up the incident form, started typing, then stopped. Report what exactly? That sensors detected something? That a truck driver claims he lost 4 hours? That you saw some lights? When you put it that way, yeah. She closed the form without filing it. They didn't talk about it again that shift. But Maria saved the sensor data, burned it to a CD, took it home with her. She never showed it to anyone, never mentioned it in any official capacity. But 3 weeks later, when she saw a news story about mysterious lights reported near Sasabe, Arizona, 60 miles east of her checkpoint, she pulled out that CD and looked at the data again. The pattern was identical. Multiple targets, perfect formation, moving perpendicular to the border. Whatever those lights were, they were still out there. And they were moving along the border like they were searching for something. Dr. James Reeves ran the remote weather monitoring station at Organ Pipe Cactus National Monument. Automated systems did most of the work. Temperature, humidity, wind speed, barometric pressure, all logged digitally every 15 minutes. James's job was to maintain the equipment, troubleshoot problems, and upload the data to the National Weather Service twice a day. It was lonely work. The station was 40 miles from the nearest town, accessible only by a rough dirt road. James stayed there for 2 weeks at a time, then got a week off. He liked the solitude. Gave him time to read, think, work on his photography. December 2nd, 2019. James was in his bunk, reading a paperback thriller, when the monitoring system chimed. That usually meant equipment failure, a sensor going offline or reading outside normal parameters. He sighed, set his book down, walked over to the computer terminal. The screen showed an alert. Electromagnetic interference detected. James frowned. That was a new one. He pulled up the detailed readout. All sensors were functioning normally except for one, the magnetometer, which measured the Earth's magnetic field. It was showing a massive spike, way beyond anything natural. He checked the calibration. Normal. Checked for equipment faults. None detected. The magnetometer was working fine. It was just registering an impossibly strong magnetic field. James stepped outside. The desert night was clear, temperature in the low 60s. He walked over to the sensor array, inspected the magnetometer housing. Everything looked normal. No damage, no loose connections. The magnetic field reading jumped again. even stronger this time. James looked up. 3 lights hung in the sky directly above the station. Bright blue-white, arranged in a triangle. They weren't moving, weren't making any sound, just hovering maybe 300 feet up. James stood there, flashlight in hand, staring. His scientific mind immediately started cataloging details. Size. Each light appeared to be roughly 10 feet in diameter. Color temperature, very high, possibly 8,000 K or above. Emission pattern, steady, no flicker or variation. Sound profile, none detected. He pulled out his phone, opened the camera app. The lights were clearly visible to the naked eye, but when he looked at his phone screen, they weren't there, just darkness. James lowered his phone, looked up again. The lights were still there. He could see them perfectly. He raised his phone again. Nothing on screen. "Okay," he muttered. "That's interesting." He went back inside, grabbed his DSLR camera. Professional equipment, high ISO capability, perfect for night photography. He set it up on a tripod outside, pointed it at the lights, adjusted the settings. 20-second exposure, ISO 3200, wide aperture. He triggered the shutter. The camera worked through its exposure. James watched the lights the entire time, making sure they stayed in frame. When the exposure finished, he checked the LCD screen. The image showed the desert, the sensor array, the clear night sky. No lights. What the hell? He tried again, same result. The lights were visible to his eyes, but completely invisible to both his phone and his professional camera. James went back inside, pulled up the sensor logs. The magnetometer was going crazy now, readings spiking every few seconds. He checked the other instruments. Everything else was normal. Temperature, pressure, humidity, all steady. It was only the magnetic field going haywire. He grabbed a notepad, started documenting everything. Time, conditions, observations. Years of scientific training kicked in. Document first, analyze later. At 3:17 a.m., the lights moved. Not gradually. They just shifted position instantly, now arranged in a straight line instead of a triangle. The magnetic field readings doubled. James's computer screen flickered. The monitoring software crashed, rebooted itself. James stood at the window, watching, writing. The lights held their new formation for exactly 2 minutes. He timed it, then shifted again. Now they were arranged in a square pattern, 4 lights instead of 3. A 4th light had appeared from somewhere, or maybe one of the original lights had split. This continued for 38 minutes. The lights would shift formation, the magnetic field would spike, James would document it all. He filled 6 pages in his notepad with observations, timestamps, sketches of each configuration. At 3:55 a.m., the lights began to move laterally. They drifted south away from the station, maintaining their square formation. James ran outside, watched them disappear over the horizon. The magnetic field readings dropped back to normal within seconds. James stood there in the dark, notepad in hand, trying to process what he'd just witnessed. As a scientist, he knew he should report this. The data was clear, indisputable. Something had caused a massive electromagnetic disturbance, and he had documented the entire event. But as a pragmatist, he knew how that report would be received. Mysterious lights, camera equipment that couldn't capture them, magnetic field readings that made no physical sense. He'd be laughed out of the weather service. So he did what seemed reasonable. He logged the magnetic anomaly in his official report. Factual, accurate, no speculation. He mentioned equipment interference, but nothing about lights in the sky. He backed up all the sensor data to his personal hard drive. And he kept the notepad. 6 pages of observations from a trained scientist, documenting something that shouldn't exist. 3 days later, 2 men in suits showed up at the station. They said they were from the National Weather Service, following up on the electromagnetic anomaly report. They asked James a lot of questions, whether he'd seen anything unusual, whether any aircraft had been in the area, whether the sensors had fully recovered. James answered truthfully but incompletely. Yes, sensors recovered. No aircraft that he'd seen. Nothing unusual to report beyond the sensor data he'd already filed. The men thanked him, looked around the station, checked the equipment themselves. Then they left. James never saw them again. Never heard any follow-up about the incident. But when he checked his sensor logs the next day, he noticed something. The magnetic field data from that night had been corrupted. Not all of it, just the 38 minutes when the lights had been overhead. The files were there, but they were filled with garbage data, unreadable. James had backups. He always kept backups. But he decided not to mention that to anyone. Bill Henderson had been running cattle on his ranch near Arivaca, Arizona for 34 years. 5,000 acres of rough desert country right up against the border. He'd seen everything. Smugglers, border patrol shootouts, illegal crossings, you name it. Nothing shocked him anymore. Until January 14th, 2020. Bill was out checking fence line at dusk, riding his ATV along the southern perimeter of his property. There was a section where coyotes, the animal kind, had been getting through, and he wanted to patch it before dark. He had about an hour of daylight left, maybe less. He was about 2 miles from his house when his ATV's engine cut out. Just died. Bill tried to restart it. Nothing. Not even a click. The battery was good. He'd replaced it 6 months ago. He checked the fuel line, the spark plug, everything he could think of. The engine was mechanically sound. It just wouldn't turn over. "Son of a bitch," Bill muttered. He pulled out his phone to call his foreman, ask him to bring the truck out. No signal. That wasn't unusual this far from the house, but it was annoying. He was about to start walking when he noticed the silence. The desert is never truly quiet. There's always something. Wind in the mesquite, birds, insects, distant highway noise. But right now, there was nothing. Complete, absolute silence. Bill looked around. The sun was low on the horizon, painting the sky orange and purple. And there, maybe half a mile to the south, was something that didn't belong. A light, pale blue, hovering about 50 feet off the ground. As he watched, it split into 2 lights, then 3, then they merged back into 1. Bill had lived in the desert his entire life. He knew aircraft lights, he knew vehicle lights, he knew what atmospheric phenomena looked like. This was none of those things. The light began moving toward him, slowly at first, then picking up speed. Bill's instinct was to run, but something kept him rooted in place. Not fear, something else. A strange calm, like part of his brain had decided there was no point in running. The light stopped maybe 200 feet away. This close, Bill could see it wasn't just a light. There was structure behind it. Something solid, metallic, reflecting the sunset. Disc-shaped, he thought, though it was hard to tell with the light so bright. He heard a sound then. Not mechanical, more like humming. A deep bass frequency that he felt in his chest more than heard with his ears. It made his teeth ache. Bill stood there next to his dead ATV, watching this thing hover in front of him. Part of his mind was screaming at him to move, to do something. But his body wouldn't cooperate. He just stood there, watching. The light pulsed once, twice. Then the object began rising, still facing him, backing away. It climbed maybe 200 feet, then shot off to the west faster than anything Bill had ever seen. 1 second it was there, the next it was a point of light on the horizon, then gone. The silence broke. Suddenly, Bill could hear everything again. Wind, birds settling in for the night, the distant rumble of a truck on Highway 286. His ATV started on the first try, engine running smooth like nothing had happened. Bill rode back to his house, parked the ATV, went inside. His wife was making dinner. She asked him if he'd fixed the fence. He said yes, even though he hadn't. He ate dinner, watched TV, went to bed. Didn't mention what he'd seen. 3 days later, he drove back out to that section of fence line. In the daylight, everything looked normal, except for one thing, a perfect circle of dead grass, about 30 feet in diameter, right where the object had been hovering. Bill knelt down, touched the grass. It was brittle, dried out completely, like it had been dead for months. But 3 days ago, it had been green. He'd ridden past this exact spot dozens of times. He stood up, looked around. No other vegetation was affected. Just this one circle. Bill pulled out his phone, took several photos. Then he got back in his truck and drove home. He never reported it. Never told anyone except his wife. And only then because he couldn't keep it to himself any longer. She listened, didn't laugh, didn't question. Just asked him if he was okay. 2 weeks later, the dead circle was still there. Bill checked on it regularly. The dead grass never recovered. Eventually, he just avoided that section of fence line. Had his foreman handle any repairs needed in that area. The circle remained visible for 8 months before the monsoon season finally washed it away. But Bill never forgot where it had been. And whenever he rode his ATV anywhere near that spot, he'd check the sky, wondering if those lights would come back. They never did. But Bill kept watching, just in case. Luis Mendoza and his 2-man crew were responsible for maintaining the cell towers scattered across southern Arizona. It was good work, steady pay, lots of driving, plenty of time alone in the desert. Luis had been doing it for 11 years. February 8, 2020. They had a service call at a tower site near 3 Points, about 40 miles southwest of Tucson. The tower's backup generator had failed, and they needed to replace it before the next monsoon season. Standard job, maybe 3 hours of work. Luis drove the service truck, his crew members Danny and Scott riding passenger. They reached the site at 11 a.m., pulled through the security gate, parked near the equipment shed. The tower rose 200 feet above them, red lights blinking at the top. "Okay," Luis said. "Danny, you're on the generator swap. Scott, check the battery banks. I'm going to run diagnostics on the main controller." They split up. Luis headed to the control room, a small concrete building at the base of the tower. He unlocked the door, stepped inside, booted up the diagnostic computer. Everything looked normal. Power systems functioning, redundancies online, no alerts. He ran through the checklist, documented everything. By the time he was done, 45 minutes had passed. Luis stepped back outside. Danny and Scott were standing next to the service truck, both looking up at the sky. "You guys done already?" Danny didn't look at him. "Luis, come look at this." Luis walked over. "What?" Scott pointed. "That." High up, maybe 5,000 feet, were 6 objects. They looked like metallic spheres, catching the sunlight, moving in perfect formation. As Luis watched, they shifted, rearranging themselves from a straight line into a hexagonal pattern. "Aircraft?" Luis asked, though he already knew the answer. "No way," Danny said. "Look how they're moving. No plane does that." The objects held their hexagonal formation for about 30 seconds, then shifted again. Now they were in 2 rows of 3. then a circle, then back to a straight line. Luis pulled out his phone, zoomed in as far as he could. Through his camera, he could see them clearly. Smooth metallic surfaces, no visible means of propulsion, no wings or rotors. They were just there, floating, rearranging themselves like some kind of aerial ballet. "I'm recording this," Scott said, holding up his phone. They watched for maybe 10 minutes. The objects continued their pattern changes, never straying from their area of sky, never making any sound that Luis could hear. He walked away from the generator noise, listened carefully. Still nothing. Then, all at once, the 6 objects arranged themselves in a straight line and shot off to the north. Not fast like a jet, fast like they'd simply decided to be somewhere else and physics didn't matter. They were there. Then they were dots on the horizon. Then they were gone. "Holy shit," Danny said. Luis stood there, phone still in hand, staring at the empty sky. He looked at his phone's video. It had captured everything. The objects were clearly visible, moving through their formations, then disappearing. "We're reporting this, right?" Scott asked. Luis thought about it. Report to who? The FAA? The cell company? Border Patrol? "Let me make some calls." They finished the service work, packed up their tools, drove back to Tucson. Luis spent the drive trying to figure out what to do with the video. He had clear footage of something that shouldn't exist. 6 metallic objects performing aerial maneuvers that violated basic physics. When he got back to the office, he showed the video to his supervisor. The supervisor watched it twice, didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, "Did you finish the generator swap?" "Yeah, all done, but what about—" "The generator swap is what I care about. Whatever that is on your phone, that's your business." Luis tried the FAA. They took his report, asked for his contact information, said someone would follow up. No one ever did. He tried the local news. They asked him to email the video. He did. Never heard back. He posted it on YouTube. It got 14 views in the first week. No comments, no shares. Just sat there, ignored. After a month, Luis stopped trying to get people to pay attention. He kept the original video file backed up in 3 separate places, showed it to friends occasionally. Most of them thought it was interesting, shrugged it off, moved on with their lives. But Luis couldn't let it go. He'd seen something real, something impossible, and nobody cared. The video proved it. 6 metallic objects, clear as day, performing maneuvers that no known aircraft could perform. And the world just didn't care. He still has that video, still shows it to people sometimes. And he still works cell tower maintenance driving through the desert, always checking the sky, just in case they come back. Special Agent Catherine Morrison had worked for U.S. Customs and Border Protection's Office of Professional Responsibility for 7 years. Her job was investigating alleged misconduct by CBP personnel. Most cases were straightforward. Excessive force, falsified reports, corruption. She'd seen it all. March 2020. She was assigned a weird one. Over the previous 6 months, 17 CBP agents across southern Arizona had filed reports involving unusual aerial phenomena. Lights in the desert, strange objects, equipment failures missing time. The reports were all logged, all filed properly, all basically ignored. Until someone higher up noticed the pattern. Catherine's assignment was simple. Interview the agents, review the reports, determine if there was any coordinated effort to file false reports. The implication being that maybe these agents were covering for each other, using UFO stories to explain away mistakes or violations. She started with Seth Caro, the agent who'd reported the incident on Route 85. She met him at a coffee shop in Gila Bend, recorder running, notepad ready. "Tell me what you saw." Seth described it. The lights hovering over the highway, the missing time, the dash cam footage that went black. Catherine took notes, asked clarifying questions, kept her tone neutral. "And you maintain that this actually happened? You're not embellishing for effect?" "I know how it sounds," Seth said. "But yeah, it happened exactly like I said." Catherine moved on to the next agent. And the next, she interviewed 11 of the 17 over the course of 3 weeks. Each one told a similar story. Lights in the desert, objects that moved in ways that defied physics, time that went missing, equipment that failed and then worked again. She reviewed the sensor logs, the radio recordings, the GPS data. And that's when she started noticing something. The agents were telling the truth. At least, they believed they were telling the truth. The data backed them up. Magnetic anomalies, recorded conversations that deteriorated into static, GPS tracks that showed vehicles stopping for extended periods in the middle of nowhere. Catherine had gone into this investigation assuming it was either mass hysteria or coordinated fabrication. But the evidence didn't support either theory. These were trained law enforcement officers, spread across hundreds of miles, reporting similar phenomena at different times. And the data supported their claims. She wrote her report in mid-March. Conclusion: no evidence of misconduct. All agents acted within protocol. Unusual aerial phenomena reported, unable to determine cause. Recommend further investigation by appropriate agencies. She submitted it to her supervisor on March 19th. 2 days later, he called her into his office. "I need you to revise this." "Why?" "Because it's going to create problems." "What kind of problems?" Her supervisor sighed. "Look, I don't doubt that these agents saw something, but we can't officially conclude that they saw unidentified flying objects. Do you understand how that would play?" "I didn't conclude that. I just said the reports were credible and the data supports their observations." "Which amounts to the same thing." He pushed the report back across his desk. "Revise it. Conclude that the agents experienced equipment malfunctions and made good faith reports based on incomplete information. Recommend no further action." Catherine looked at the report, then at her supervisor. That would be a lie. That would be politically appropriate. She took the report back to her desk. Sat there for an hour, staring at it. She could revise it, write what they wanted to hear, close the case. Or she could stand by her findings, even knowing they'd never see the light of day. In the end, she did both. She wrote the revision her supervisor wanted, filed it officially. Then she kept her original report, complete with all the supporting documentation, backed up on an external hard drive that she took home. No one knows about that hard drive except Catherine. She's never shown it to anyone, never leaked it, never gone public. But it exists. Sitting in her home office, in a locked drawer, password protected. 17 CBP agents, 6 months of reports, dozens of unexplained incidents, all documented, all verified, all officially dismissed. And Catherine knows the truth. She interviewed those agents, looked them in the eyes, heard the consistency in their stories. They saw something out there in the desert, something that shouldn't exist. She just can't prove it, not in any way that matters. If you plot all 17 incidents on a map, a pattern emerges, not random sightings scattered across Arizona, a specific route, following the U.S.-Mexico border from west to east. Starting near Yuma in August 2019, moving through Organ Pipe, Ajo, Sasabe, Aravaca, ending near 3 points in February 2020. Whatever those lights were, they were moving systematically along the border. Searching for something, maybe. Monitoring something. Or just observing, cataloging, gathering data. Seth Caro still works Border Patrol. Still drives Route 85 at night. Still checks his mirrors, watching for lights that shouldn't be there. Ingrid Suarez still dispatches from Ajo Station. Still has that recording of Holland's voice distorting into something inhuman. Still listens to it sometimes, late at night, wondering what really happened to him out there in the desert. Tommy Briggs still drives trucks. Takes a different route now, though. Avoids I-8 when he can. When he can't, he drives during daylight hours. He tells himself it's coincidence, that he's not actually afraid. But he won't drive that stretch at night anymore. Won't put himself in a position where he might see those 3 lights in his mirror again. Maria Delgado transferred to a different checkpoint. Told her supervisor it was for personal reasons, closer to family. The real reason was that she couldn't stop thinking about the sensor data. Couldn't stop wondering what those formations were, where they came from, what they wanted. Dr. James Reeves finished his contract at the weather station. Took a position in Nevada instead, nowhere near the border. He still has that notepad, though. 6 pages documenting something that cameras couldn't capture. Sometimes he takes it out, reads through his observations, reminds himself that he's not crazy, that it really happened. Bill Henderson still runs his ranch. That circle of dead grass is gone now, washed away by monsoons and time. But Bill knows where it was, and sometimes, late at night, he'll step outside and look at that section of his property, checking. Watching. Waiting. Luis Mendoza still maintains cell towers. Still has that video file backed up in 3 places. Still shows it to people occasionally. The YouTube video is still there too. Up to 47 views now. No comments. No shares. Just sitting in the digital void, ignored. And Catherine Morrison still works for CPB. Still investigates misconduct. Still has that external hard drive locked in her desk drawer. Still wonders if she should have done more, said more, pushed harder. They've never met each other, don't know each other's names. Each one thinks they're alone in what they saw, what they experienced. Each one carries their story quietly, privately, unsure if anyone would believe them. But the pattern is there. 17 reports in 6 months. A line of incidents tracking along the border. And then, after February 2020, nothing. The reports stopped. The lights disappeared. Whatever was moving along that stretch of desert, it finished whatever it was doing and left. Or maybe it's still there, just not revealing itself anymore. The desert keeps its secrets. And the people who work the border, who spend their nights in that vast darkness, know better than to expect answers. They saw what they saw. They know what they know. And they keep watching the sky. Because out there, in that empty space between countries, between cities, between the known and the unknown, something is moving. Something that doesn't show up on cameras, that defies physics, that erases time and memory. Something that doesn't want to be seen. But sometimes, late at night, when the desert is quiet and the stars are bright, and you're alone on a dark highway with nothing but your thoughts, sometimes you see it anyway, and you never forget. The fence line stretched for miles in both directions. Lena Montiel had walked every inch of it over the past 3 years. Rusted barbed wire, metal posts planted in hard desert soil, sensors embedded every 50 yards. This was the official boundary between Arizona and Mexico, though out here it felt more like a suggestion than a barrier. May 22, 2021. Temperature still hung around 87 degrees, even though it was past midnight. Lena walked her patrol route with a handheld spotlight, checking for cuts in the wire, fresh footprints, anything that indicated crossing activity. She'd been out here since 10 p.m. and had another 4 hours before her shift ended. Her partner, Dorian Texera, was half a mile east, working his section. They stayed in radio contact, checking in every 15 minutes. Standard protocol. The desert was too big and too empty to work alone without regular communication. Lena's radio crackled. "Sector 7 to Sector 8, how's your section looking?" She keyed her mic. "Quiet, couple of rabbit tracks near post 447, but that's it. You?" "Same. Think I saw a javelina about 20 minutes ago, but it took off before I could get a good look." "Lucky you. Those things are mean. Tell me about it. Check back in 15? "Copy that." Lena continued her walk, spotlight sweeping left and right. The beam caught creosote bushes, cholas, the occasional saguaro. Nothing unusual. She was approaching post 451 when she noticed something odd. Light. Not her spotlight reflecting off something. Not a distant vehicle. Just light, hanging in the air about 10 feet off the ground. Maybe 30 yards beyond the fence line on the Mexican side. Pale, blue-white. Steady. Not moving. Lena stopped, lowered her spotlight, stared at it. Her first thought was someone with a powerful flashlight. Maybe coyotes signaling to their group on the American side. But the light wasn't directional. It didn't cast a beam. It was just there, a sphere of luminescence floating in the darkness. She raised her radio. "Sector 8 to Sector 7. Go ahead." "You got eyes on anything unusual? I'm seeing a light source, Mexican side, about 30 yards past the fence." "What kind of light?" "Can't tell. Looks like, I don't know, like someone hung a camping lantern in midair." "Human activity?" "Can't tell. No movement, no voices, just the light." "Want me to head your way?" Lena hesitated. The light wasn't doing anything threatening, but something about it felt wrong. "Yeah, come check this out." "On my way, give me 5 minutes." Lena kept her eyes on the light. It hadn't moved, hadn't changed intensity. She tried shining her spotlight directly at it. The beam illuminated the desert scrub between her and the light. But when it hit the sphere itself, nothing happened. The light didn't get brighter, didn't reflect, didn't react at all. That's when she noticed the second strange thing. The light wasn't casting shadows. Lena moved her position, tried different angles. A light source that bright should cast shadows from the nearby vegetation. Cholas, mesquite branches, anything between it and the ground. But there were no shadows. The desert beneath the light looked exactly the same as the desert around it. She stepped closer to the fence, staying on the American side. The light was clearer now, definitely spherical, maybe 3 feet in diameter. The edges were crisp, well-defined, not fuzzy like you'd expect from a distant lantern or flashlight. Dorian's voice came over the radio. "I'm about 2 minutes out. Still see it?" "Yeah, it hasn't moved." "Any idea what it is?" "None." Lena heard footsteps behind her. She turned. Dorian was jogging up, his own spotlight bouncing with each step. He reached her position, breathing slightly hard from the run. "Where?" Lena pointed. "Right there, about 30 yards past the fence." Dorian raised his spotlight, aimed it at the sphere. His beam hit it the same way hers had, illuminating everything around it but not affecting the light itself. "What the hell?" Dorian lowered his spotlight. "That's not normal." No kidding. They stood there together, watching. The light continued doing nothing, just hovering, glowing. "Should we call it in?" Dorian asked. "Call in what? Unknown light source?" "They'll ask if it's human activity, and we can't answer that." "So, what do we do?" Lena thought about it. Their job was to prevent illegal crossings, report suspicious activity. A mysterious, floating light definitely qualified as suspicious. But approaching it meant crossing into Mexico, which they weren't authorized to do without coordination with Mexican authorities. "Let's get closer to the fence," Lena said. "See if we can figure out what we're looking at." They walked forward together, stopping at the barbed wire. The light was now about 25 yards away. This close, Lena could see details she'd missed before. The sphere wasn't perfectly uniform. There were subtle variations in brightness, almost like clouds moving across the surface. But it still didn't cast shadows, and it still made no sound. Dorian pulled out his phone, held it up to take a photo. He framed the shot, tapped the screen, checked the image. "You've got to be kidding me." "What?" He showed her the phone. The photo showed the fence, the desert beyond, the dark sky. No light. Lena pulled out her own phone, tried the same thing. Same result. The light was invisible in the camera. "Okay," Dorian said slowly. "That's officially weird. Should we try video? Worth a shot." Dorian switched his phone to video mode, hit record. He aimed it at the light for 30 seconds, then stopped playback. Again, nothing. Just darkness where the sphere should be. Lena keyed her radio. "Sector 8 to dispatch." Static, no response. She tried again. "Sector 8 to dispatch, do you copy?" More static. She checked her radio, full battery, no error lights. The device was working fine, just not connecting. "Dispatch, this is Sector 7. Dorian tried his radio. Nothing. They looked at each other. Both radios failing simultaneously wasn't normal. The light pulsed, just once, a quick brightening and dimming, like someone had turned up a dimmer switch and then turned it back down. The pulse lasted maybe half a second. "Did you see that?" Lena asked. "Yeah." The light pulsed again, then again. A slow rhythm, about 5 seconds between each pulse. Lena felt her skin prickling. Something was very wrong here. Her training said to retreat, call for backup, establish a safe perimeter. But they couldn't call anyone. Radios were down. And something about the light held her attention, made it hard to look away. The pulsing stopped. The sphere brightened, twice as intense as before. Lena raised her hand to shield her eyes. The glow was getting uncomfortable to look at directly. Then, the light began to move. Not toward them, not away. It shifted laterally, tracking east along the fence line, maintaining its distance from the border. It moved smoothly, no bobbing or wavering, like it was on rails. "Follow it," Dorian said. They walked along the fence, keeping pace with the sphere. It moved at a steady speed, maybe 3 miles per hour, a brisk walking pace. Lena kept trying her radio every 30 seconds. Still no connection. The light continued east for maybe 200 yards, then stopped. It dimmed back to its original intensity, hung there motionless. Dorian checked his watch. "How long have we been watching this thing?" "Maybe 10 minutes. He frowned, tapped his watch face. "My watch says 12:47. What's yours say?" Lena checked. 12:47. "When did you first see the light?" "Around 12:30. So 17 minutes, not 10. Lena did the math. She'd called Dorian at 12:30. He'd taken 5 minutes to reach her position. They'd observed the light, taken photos, followed it. That should have been maybe 12 minutes total, but 17 minutes had passed. "Check your phone," she said. Dorian pulled it out. 12:47. Radio time code? They both checked their radios. 12:40. "Okay," Lena said carefully. "So we're both wrong about the timeline, or time got weird." They stared at the light. It had started pulsing again, that same slow rhythm. 5 seconds between pulses. Lena's radio suddenly crackled to life. Dispatch to all units, communications test, Sector 7, 8. Confirm receipt. She grabbed her radio. Sector 8, copy. We read you clear. Sector 7, copy, Dorian added. Copy both. Dispatch out. Their radios were working again, just like that. No explanation, no transition, just back online. Lena looked at where the light had been. It was gone. Not faded, not moved away, simply absent. The desert was dark and empty in all directions. Where did it go? Dorian swept his spotlight across the area. Nothing. They walked back to where they'd first seen it, checked the ground on both sides of the fence. No evidence of anything. No footprints, no tire tracks, no scorched earth. Just undisturbed desert. What do we put in the report? Dorian asked. That was the question. They'd both seen it. They had 17 minutes of missing time and dual radio failure to support their account. But no photos, no video, no physical evidence. Unknown light source, Lena said. Mexican side of the fence. Brief observation, no apparent threat. Radio communications disrupted temporarily, then restored. You're not going to mention the time thing? And say what? That we lost track of 7 minutes? They'll think we were goofing off. Dorian nodded slowly. What about the light not showing up on cameras? Or the shadows? You want to put observed physically impossible phenomena in an official report. Fair point. They finished their patrol routes, checked in every 15 minutes like clockwork. Nothing else unusual happened. At 4 a.m. they clocked out, wrote up their incident reports, kept them vague. Unknown light source, possible smuggler signal, no contact made. Lena went home, tried to sleep, couldn't. She kept seeing that sphere in her mind, the way it hadn't cast shadows, the way it had moved without sound or visible propulsion, the way 7 minutes had simply vanished. 3 days later, she was back on patrol. Different section of fence, different partner. Around 1 a.m., she saw it again. Same pale blue-white glow. Same size. Same height off the ground. Mexican side of the fence, maybe 40 yards out this time. Lena didn't call her partner, didn't call dispatch. She just stood there, watching, waiting to see what it would do. The sphere pulsed. Once, twice, 3 times. Then it began moving, not along the fence line this time, but straight toward her. Dorian Texera had been keeping a journal since he was 16. Nothing fancy. Just a simple notebook where he recorded the day's events, his thoughts, random observations. He'd filled 23 notebooks over the past 14 years. After the incident with Lena, he started a new section, separate from his regular entries. He labeled it Border Anomalies, and began documenting everything he could remember about that night. May 22nd, 2021, 12:30 a.m. approx. Light observed by L. Montiel, Sector 8, Post 451, pale blue-white, spherical, 3 feet diameter. No shadows cast despite intensity. Invisible to phone cameras. Both radios failed simultaneously. 7 minutes unaccounted for. Felt like 10 mins, actually 17. Light moved east along fence, then vanished when radio contact restored. Dorian read his entry 3 times trying to find details he'd missed. The thing that bothered him most wasn't the light itself. Weird stuff happened in the desert. It was the time discrepancy. 7 missing minutes. And the way both he and Lena had estimated the same wrong duration, like their sense of time had been synchronized to something off baseline. He decided to do something that probably crossed a line professionally. He called Lena's cell phone. She picked up on the second ring. "Tixira? Yeah, you awake? Can't sleep. Keep thinking about it." "Same. Listen, I'm keeping notes on what happened. Private notes. Nothing official. You remember anything else?" Silence for a moment, then, "The edges. What about them?" The sphere had really crisp edges, like it was cut out of the air with scissors. Natural light doesn't look like that. There's always some diffusion, some bleed. This was perfectly defined. Dorian added that to his notes. "Good catch. Anything else?" "Temperature. I didn't notice it at the time, but thinking back, the air felt cooler when we were standing near the fence. Not a lot, maybe 5 degrees, but it was noticeable." "Okay, that's good. That's evidence of something." "Evidence of what?" "I don't know, but it's physical, measurable. If it happens again, we'll know to check for temperature changes." "If it happens again," Lena repeated. "You think it will? Don't you?" Another silence, then, "Yeah, I think we're going to see it again." Dorian hung up, added the temperature detail to his notes. Then he did something else. He went online and started searching for similar reports. Lights near the border. Missing time. Equipment failures. He found more than he expected. Forums dedicated to UFO sightings had dozens of reports from the Arizona-Mexico border region. Most were dismissed as flares, aircraft, or hoaxes. But buried in the noise were accounts that matched what he and Lena had experienced. Spherical lights. No shadows. Cameras that couldn't capture images, time distortions. A truck driver named Briggs had reported 3 triangle-arranged lights on I-8. A weather station operator named Reeves had documented electromagnetic anomalies during a light sighting. A rancher named Henderson had found a circle of dead grass where a light had hovered. Dorian created a spreadsheet. Date, location, witness name if available, description of phenomena. He plotted them on a map. The sightings formed a pattern. They tracked along the border from west to east, spanning from late 2019 through early 2021. His incident with Lena fit the pattern perfectly. Same general area, same type of phenomena, continuing the eastward trend. Whatever these lights were, they'd been moving systematically along the border for over a year. And nobody in any official capacity seemed to be connecting the dots. Dorian spent 3 hours compiling his research before he finally felt tired enough to sleep. As he was closing his laptop, his phone buzzed. Text message from Lena. "Saw it again tonight, alone this time. It came closer." Dorian stared at the message. Typed back, "How close?" 10 feet from the fence. Watched me for 5 minutes, then left. "You okay?" "Physically, yes. Mentally, not sure. We need to talk about this. Tomorrow. Coffee?" 00900, send me the location." Dorian found a cafe in Nogales, sent her the address. Then he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about that sphere of shadowless light. Thinking about Lena standing alone in the dark while something impossible watched her. Thinking about how this was just beginning. The cafe was nearly empty at 9 in the morning. Dorian arrived first, ordered black coffee, claimed a corner table away from the windows. Lena showed up 10 minutes later, looking like she hadn't slept well. Maybe hadn't slept at all. She got her coffee, sat down across from him. "Thanks for meeting me." "Of course. You want to tell me what happened?" Lena wrapped her hands around her cup, stared into the dark liquid. "I was on patrol, different sector, around 1 a.m. I saw the light, same as before, but this time it was closer to the fence. Maybe 40 yards out. What did you do?" "Watched it. Didn't call anyone, didn't try to take photos, just observed." She paused. "It started moving toward me, not Fast but deliberate. Like it knew I was there. Did you retreat? No, I should have, but I didn't. I just stood there and let it approach. Dorian leaned forward. How close did it get? 10 feet from the fence. Close enough that I could have reached out and almost touched it if I'd crossed the barrier. She looked up, met his eyes. It was bigger up close, not 3 feet, more like 5 feet diameter, and there was texture to it. The surface wasn't smooth. It looked like, I don't know, like flowing water frozen in place, constantly shifting but staying the same shape. Did it make any sound? No, complete silence. But I felt something, pressure in my ears like when you're on an airplane. And that temperature drop I mentioned before? It was stronger, had to be at least 10 degrees cooler near the light. Dorian pulled out his notebook, started writing. Any missing time? Yeah, 5 minutes, maybe 6. I looked at my watch when the light first appeared, 1:04 a.m. I looked again after it left, 1:15, but it felt like 3 minutes at most. Radio problems? Didn't even try the radio. I don't know why. It's like I knew it wouldn't work, so I didn't bother. Did the light do anything else? Any patterns, movements? Lena nodded. It pulsed. Same rhythm as before, about 5 seconds between pulses. But this time, I counted. 18 pulses total, then it stopped. Stayed bright for maybe 30 seconds, then it just switched off, like a light bulb. 1 second it was there, the next it was gone. Dorian finished writing, looked up. I've been doing research. There have been other sightings along the border, a lot of them, going back almost 2 years. Other patrol agents? Some, also civilians. Truck drivers, ranchers, weather station operators, all reporting similar phenomena. Spherical lights, time distortions, equipment failures. Lena's expression shifted from tired to alert. Do the reports show a pattern? Yeah, west to east, over time. Like something moving along the border in stages. Mapping the area? Maybe. Or searching for something. Or just observing. Dorian showed her his spreadsheet on his phone. Look at the dates and locations. Late 2019, western Arizona near Yuma. Early 2020, moving through Oregon Pipe and Ajo. Mid-2020, around Sasabe and Arivica. Our sightings this year are farther east. Lena studied the data. If this pattern continues, the next sightings should be around Naco or Douglas, eastern edge of the border. That's what I'm thinking. So, what do we do with this information? That was the question Dorian had been wrestling with. We could file a comprehensive report, compile all the data, show the pattern, request a formal investigation. Which will get us laughed out of the room. Probably. Or we could keep monitoring ourselves. Document what we see, build a case that can't be dismissed. Dorian nodded. I already started. I've got detailed notes on our first encounter, and now this second one. If we keep collecting data, timestamps, temperatures, exact locations, witness corroboration, eventually, we'll have enough evidence to force someone to take it seriously. Lena considered this, took a long drink of her coffee. What if it's not safe? What if these lights are dangerous? Have they hurt anyone? Not that we know of. But absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. True, but we're trained professionals. We know how to assess threats and maintain safe distances, and we're already out there patrolling every night. We're going to see these things whether we're actively looking for them or not. Fair point. Lena set down her cup. Okay, I'm in. We document everything, compare notes, build the case, but we keep it between us for now. No official reports unless we get something undeniable. They shook hands across the table, a pact between two people who'd seen something impossible and refused to let it be forgotten. Over the next 3 weeks, Dorian expanded his research. He reached out to other Border Patrol agents through unofficial channels, friends of friends, people he'd worked with in the past. He asked careful questions about unusual sightings, equipment malfunctions, unexplained phenomena. Most people had nothing to report, but a few had stories. Lights in the desert, missing time, radios that failed and restarted, dash cams that went black during critical moments. Dorian added each account to his database. He created a detailed timeline, cross-referenced witness testimonies, looked for commonalities. And the pattern held. Whatever these lights were, they were methodical. They were intelligent, and they were still active. On June 8, 2021, Lena texted him at 2:34 a.m. "It's back. Bring your thermometer and notepad. Post 523. Dorian was off duty, home in bed. He sat up, grabbed his keys, headed for his truck. Post 523 was 40 minutes away. He drove fast, watching the sky, wondering if he'd see anything during the drive. He reached Lena's position at 3:19 a.m. She was standing at the fence line, spotlight off, staring south into Mexico. Dorian parked, grabbed his digital thermometer from the glove box, approached on foot. "Still here?" he called out quietly. Lena pointed. About 20 yards past the fence, the sphere hovered. Same pale blue-white glow. Same shadowless illumination. Dorian checked the ambient temperature. 81 degrees Fahrenheit. He walked to the fence line, stood next to Lena. Checked again, 73 degrees. 8-degree drop, he said. Consistent with your previous observation. Watch this. Lena raised her spotlight, aimed it at the sphere. The beam traveled through the intervening space, illuminated the desert scrub, but when it hit the sphere, nothing changed. The light neither brightened nor dimmed. Dorian tried his own spotlight. Same result. Now look at this. Lena turned her spotlight on the ground beneath the sphere. See it? Dorian looked. The shadow cast by a nearby cholla cactus was clearly visible in Lena's beam, except where the sphere's glow should have cast additional light. There was no additional illumination, no secondary shadow. The sphere was somehow present, but not interacting with normal light physics. "That's impossible," Dorian said. "I know." They stood together, watching, documenting. Dorian took temperature readings every 30 seconds. The 8-degree differential remained constant. He checked his watch against Lena's. Both showed 3:24 a.m. The sphere began pulsing. 5 seconds between pulses. Dorian counted. 18 pulses, exactly as Lena had described in her previous encounter. Then it moved. Not toward them this time. It rose vertically, climbing maybe 50 feet, then stopped. It hung there for 30 seconds, then descended back to its original position. "First time I've seen it do that," Lena said. Dorian checked his watch. 3:29 a.m. 5 minutes had passed since he'd arrived, but it felt like 2, maybe 3 at most. "Time's moving weird again," he said. Lena checked her watch. "Yeah, we need to stay sharp, keep checking constantly." For the next 10 minutes, measured carefully, 1 minute at a time, they observed the sphere. It pulsed, rose and fell twice more, then began moving east along the fence line. They followed it for maybe a quarter mile. At 3:43 a.m. by Dorian's watch, the sphere stopped. It brightened significantly, almost painful to look at. Then it collapsed inward, not exploding, not fading, but contracting. The 3-foot sphere became a 2-foot sphere, then 1 foot, then a point of light so intense it left after images. Then nothing. Darkness. Complete absence of light. Dorian and Lena stood in the quiet desert, hearts pounding. flashlights illuminating empty space where the impossible thing had been. "Did you see that?" Lena asked. "The way it contracted? Yeah, that was new. We need to document this immediately, before we forget details." They walked back to Dorian's truck. He pulled out his notebook, wrote everything down while Lena dictated, correcting his accounts, adding observations he'd missed. They spent 20 minutes reconstructing the entire encounter. When they were done, Dorian had 3 pages of detailed notes. Times, temperatures, exact descriptions of movements and behaviors. This was evidence. Real, documented evidence that something anomalous was happening along the border. "What's next?" Lena asked. "We keep watching, keep documenting, and we wait for someone else to see it. What if nobody does? Then we find them ourselves. If this pattern holds, there are other people out there who've encountered these lights. We find them, compare notes, build a comprehensive database. Eventually, we'll have enough data that it can't be ignored." Lena nodded. "And if the lights keep getting closer, keep behaving more aggressively, then we reassess. But right now, they're not threatening, just observing, same as we're doing." They said goodnight, headed to their respective vehicles. Dorian sat in his truck for a moment before starting the engine, looking out at the dark desert. Somewhere out there, that sphere of impossible light was doing... what? Waiting? Watching? Moving on to the next section of border? He didn't know, but he was going to find out. Dorian became obsessed with the temperature anomaly. If the sphere consistently caused an 8 to 10 degree temperature drop in its immediate vicinity, that was measurable, quantifiable evidence. Not subjective witness testimony, not failed electronic equipment. Actual physical data that could be verified. He bought 3 additional digital thermometers, all calibrated to the same standard. He created a grid system covering the fence line from post 450 to post 550, the area where most sightings had occurred. Every night he had off, he drove to the border and took baseline temperature readings at 50 different points along that 10-mile stretch. The ambient temperature varied, obviously. Night to night, position to position, it ranged from the high 70s to mid-80s Fahrenheit this time of year. But Dorian was looking for anomalies, spots where the temperature dropped significantly without any natural explanation. On his 4th night of surveying, June 14th, he found one, post 492. Ambient temperature everywhere else along his route was holding steady at 82 degrees. At post 492, it read 74. Dorian checked his thermometer, made sure it was working properly. He walked 20 feet east, 82 degrees, 20 feet west, 82 degrees. Back to post 492, 74 degrees. He marked the spot in his notebook, took photos of the area, checked for any natural explanation. There was no water source nearby, no unusual vegetation, no shade or geographical features that would cause a localized temperature drop. He stayed at that spot for 30 minutes, taking readings every 5 minutes. The temperature remained constant at 74 degrees, while the surrounding area held at 82. Then, at 11:47 p.m., it shifted. The temperature at post 492 rose back to 82 degrees. The anomaly had disappeared. Dorian stood there in the dark, thinking. The sphere wasn't visible, but the temperature effect had been present. Either the sphere had been there but invisible, or it left some kind of residual effect after departing. He texted Lena. Found isolated temp drop. Post 492. No visible light. Anomaly lasted 30+ minutes, then normalized. Her response came back within a minute. Lingering effect? Or light was there but not visible to us? Unknown. Need more data points. Over the next week, Dorian expanded his survey. He recruited 2 other agents he trusted, Marcus Orozco and Talia Ruiz, who agreed to help with temperature mapping without asking too many questions about why. The 4 of them covered 60 miles of border fence, taking readings every night. They found 7 more temperature anomalies. All of them were 8 to 10 degree drops localized to specific posts along the fence. 5 occurred when no light was visible. 2 coincided with actual sphere sightings, one by Lena, one by Marcus. Dorian plotted them on his map. The anomalies formed a line, tracking east along the border, just like the pattern he'd identified in witness reports. Whatever these spheres were, they were leaving a measurable physical trace, and that trace suggested they were present far more often than visual sightings indicated. On June 23rd, Lena called him at 2 a.m. "You need to get to post 531, right now." "What's happening?" "There are 3 of them, all at once. I've never seen more than one." Dorian was there in 35 minutes. When he arrived, Lena was standing at the fence with Marcus and Talia. Apparently she'd called them too. 3 spheres hung in the Mexican desert, maybe 40 yards past the fence. They were arranged in a triangle formation, each one identical to the others. Pale, blue-white glow, approximately 5 feet diameter, hovering 10 feet off the ground. Dorian grabbed his thermometer, checked the reading. 71 degrees. The ambient temperature just 100 feet away was 84 degrees, a 13-degree drop. "Stronger effect with multiple spheres," he said, writing in his notebook. The 3 lights began moving in unison. They maintained their triangle formation but rotated clockwise, like they were orbiting an invisible center point. The rotation was smooth, mechanical, perfectly synchronized. Marcus pulled out his phone, tried to record video. Still not showing up on camera. "Expected," Dorian said. "Whatever wavelength they're emitting, our cameras can't detect it, but our eyes can." "How is that possible?" Talia asked. "It's not according to conventional physics, which means either our understanding is incomplete or we're dealing with technology far beyond our own." The spheres continued their rotation for 2 minutes, then stopped. They reformed into a straight line, all 3 lights side by side. Lena checked her watch. "We've been watching for 7 minutes. Dorian checked his own watch. "I make it 8. "I say 6, Marcus added. They all compared watches. All 3 showed different times, 2:38 a.m., 2:39 a.m., 2:37 a.m., but they'd all synchronized their watches before Dorian arrived. "Time distortion is definitely tied to proximity," Dorian said. "The closer we are to the spheres, the more our perception of time gets disrupted." The lights shifted formation again, now arranged in a vertical stack, one above the other, maintaining perfect spacing. They held this configuration for 30 seconds, then collapsed inward simultaneously. 3 points of light became 3 pinpricks, then vanished. Temperature immediately rose. Dorian checked his thermometer, 82 degrees. The anomaly had disappeared instantly when the lights left. "Okay," Lena said. 3 spheres. New behavior patterns. Perfect synchronization. Time distortion affecting all 4 of us simultaneously. This is beyond anything we've documented before. Marcus spoke up. "I'm going to say it. We need to file an official report." "With what evidence?" Talia asked. "No photos, no videos, just our testimony." "And the temperature data," Dorian added. "I have baseline readings from 60 different locations along the fence and documented anomalies that correlate with sphere sightings. That's physical evidence." Lena shook her head. "Still not enough. They'll say faulty thermometers, atmospheric conditions, insufficient sample size. We need something undeniable." "Like what?" Marcus asked. "Physical trace. ground marks, residual radiation, something that persists after the lights leave. The rancher, Dorian said suddenly. Henderson, his report mentioned a circle of dead grass where a sphere had hovered. That was almost a year ago. You think there are other sites like that? Maybe. We should search the areas where we've had sightings. Look for any unusual marks on the ground, dead vegetation, scorched earth. They spent the rest of that shift walking the fence line, examining the ground near posts where temperature anomalies had occurred. They found nothing. No marks, no dead vegetation, nothing unusual. But 3 nights later, Lena found something different. Post 5 and 17. Lena was doing her regular patrol when she noticed the fence itself looked strange. The barbed wire had a sheen to it, like it had been coated with something. She stopped, pulled out her flashlight, examined it closely. The top strand of wire, about a 10-foot section, looked tarnished. Not rusted, the metal underneath was still sound, but the surface had a blackish-gray coating that hadn't been there before. Lena knew this section of fence. She walked it 3 times a week. This tarnish was new. She pulled out her phone, took photos from multiple angles. Then she tried something. She touched the wire with her fingertip. The tarnish came off like soot. Black residue on her finger, slightly greasy. She rubbed it between her thumb and forefinger. It had texture, like very fine powder mixed with oil. Lena sniffed it. No smell. She resisted the urge to taste it. That would be stupid. But she did pull out a small evidence bag she carried for collecting border trash and carefully scraped some of the residue into it. She checked her notes. Post 517 was one of the locations where they documented a temperature anomaly 4 days ago. No visible sphere, but the temperature drop had been present for nearly an hour. Lena walked the fence line for another 100 yards in both directions. No other tarnished sections. Just that one 10-foot stretch at post 517. She called Dorian. Found something. Physical residue on the fence wire. Post 517. I'm 40 minutes out. Can you wait? I'll be here. Dorian arrived with a small field testing kit he'd bought online. pH strips, reagent papers, basic chemical analysis tools. Not sophisticated, but better than nothing. He examined the tarnished wire, collected his own samples, ran them through his tests. pH neutral, he said, reading a strip. Not acidic, not alkaline. No reaction to oxidizing agents, no reaction to reducing agents. He tried another test. Weakly magnetic, but that could be from the iron in the steel wire underneath. So, what is it? I have no idea, but it's definitely not natural corrosion. He bagged several samples, labeled them carefully. We need to get this analyzed by a real lab. How do we do that without raising questions? Leave that to me. I know someone who owes me a favor. 3 days later, Dorian got the results back. His contact at Arizona State University, a chemistry professor he'd helped with a border-crossing research project years ago, had analyzed the samples on the quiet. The residue was primarily carbon with trace amounts of silicon, aluminum, and several rare earth elements. The carbon had an unusual crystalline structure, not quite graphene, but similar. The rare earth elements were present in ratios that didn't occur naturally. In other words, it was manufactured, or at least processed by something capable of manipulating matter at the molecular level. Dorian showed the results to Lena over coffee. This is it. This is physical evidence that something non-natural is happening. What's the professor think it is? He doesn't. I told him I found it at an old industrial site, didn't mention where or when. He's curious, wants more samples, but I told him that's all I had. Can we use this in a report? Officially? No, I'd have to reveal where I got it analyzed, and that would open up too many questions. But we know, we have physical proof that these spheres leave measurable traces. Lena nodded slowly. So we keep collecting data, keep documenting. Eventually, we'll have enough that someone will have to take us seriously. Over the next month, they found 3 more sections of tarnished fence wire, all correlating with previous temperature anomalies. They collected samples from each location, stored them carefully in Dorian's locked file cabinet at home. They also expanded their monitoring network. Marcus and Talia recruited 2 more trusted agents, Sofia Guerrero and James Park, who agreed to help with observations. The 6 of them covered nearly 80 miles of border fence between them, all watching for lights, temperature anomalies, and physical traces. The sightings increased. July 2021 saw 11 documented sphere observations across their monitoring area. Sometimes single spheres, sometimes pairs, once a group of 5, all arranged in a star pattern. The lights were becoming more frequent, more bold, more visible. And they were moving farther east. The pattern was holding. Whatever these things were, they were systematically scanning the entire Arizona-Mexico border. On July 29th, something changed. Dorian was at post 541, taking routine temperature readings, when he noticed the ambient temperature was dropping everywhere, not just at a single location. Within 5 minutes, the temperature along a quarter-mile stretch of fence had dropped from 86 degrees to 78 degrees. He radioed Lena. Something's different. Widespread temperature drop, not localized. You seeing anything? Checking now. Yeah. I'm reading 77 degrees when it should be mid-80s. What's causing it? I don't know, but Dorian stopped. On the horizon, about 2 miles south into Mexico, he could see lights. Not the usual single spheres. A whole line of them, maybe 20 or more, all hovering at the same height. Lena, you need to see this. Get to the highest point you can find and look south. On it. Dorian climbed onto the hood of his truck for a better view. The line of lights extended for what looked like miles. They were too far away to make out individual details, but the formation was clear, a perfect horizontal line stretching east to west across the desert. His radio crackled. Lena's voice, tight with tension. I see them. There must be 30 of them. Dorian, what is this? I don't know. But I think this is what they've been building up to. The lights began moving. All together, maintaining their line formation, they drifted north toward the border. Slowly at first, then picking up speed. Dorian grabbed his radio. All units, this is Texira. We've got multiple lights incoming from the south. Everyone needs to get to high ground and observe. Document everything. Within minutes, responses came back. Marcus saw them. Talia saw them. Sophia saw them. James saw them. All 6 members of their informal monitoring network were watching the same phenomenon. The line of lights reached the border and stopped. They hovered maybe 100 feet on the Mexican side, spread out along several miles of fence. From Dorian's vantage point, he could count at least 25 individual spheres. They began pulsing in unison. On, off, a slow, deliberate rhythm. Dorian checked his watch. 10:43 p.m. He made a note, kept watching. The spheres held their line for 5 minutes. Then, one by one, from west to east, they began to rise. Each sphere climbed vertically until it reached maybe 500 feet altitude, then stopped. They were creating a vertical wall of light along the border. This is incredible, Lena's voice came over the radio. Are you recording this? Trying to, still not showing up on my phone camera. Same here. We need someone with better equipment. The wall of lights held for another 3 minutes. Then, starting from the western end, each sphere began moving north, crossing into American airspace. They moved slowly, deliberately, maintaining their spacing and altitude. Dorian watched them pass overhead. 25 spheres of impossible light, each one traveling in perfect formation, completely silent, leaving that characteristic temperature drop in their wake. When the last sphere crossed the border, the entire formation accelerated. They shot off to the northeast altogether, disappearing into the night sky within seconds. Dorian stood on the hood of his truck, staring at the empty sky, his heart pounding. He checked his watch. 10:58 p.m. 15 minutes had passed, but it had felt like 5. He grabbed his radio. "Everyone check your watches. What time do you have?" The responses came back varied. Marcus said 10:56. Talia said 10:59. Sophia said 11:01. James said 10:54. All 6 of them had been watching the same event, but they'd experienced different durations. The time distortion had affected them all, but not uniformly. Dorian's radio crackled again. A different voice this time. "Dispatch. All units, be advised we're receiving reports of unusual aerial activity along the entire southern border. Multiple jurisdictions reporting unidentified lights. All personnel are to document observations and file standard reports. Dispatch out." Lena keyed her mic. "Dorian, did you hear that? This isn't just us. This is happening everywhere." Dorian climbed down from his truck, mind racing. 25 spheres crossing the border in formation. Multiple reports from multiple jurisdictions. Dispatch officially acknowledging unusual activity. This was it. This was the undeniable event they'd been waiting for. He pulled out his phone, started typing an email to everyone in their monitoring network. Subject line, "Document everything." Whatever these lights were, they'd just made their presence impossible to ignore. And Dorian intended to make sure this time there would be a record. A real, comprehensive, multi-witness record that couldn't be dismissed or covered up. The game had changed. 3 days after the mass sighting, every Border Patrol agent in southern Arizona was required to attend a briefing at the Tucson sector headquarters. Mandatory attendance. No exceptions. Dorian sat in the auditorium with 200 other agents, waiting. Lena was 5 rows ahead of him. Marcus and Talia were somewhere in the back. All of them wondering what the official line was going to be. A man in a dark suit took the podium. He didn't introduce himself or his agency affiliation, just launched straight into his presentation. On the evening of July 29th, multiple CBP personnel reported observing unusual aerial lights along the southern border. These reports have been reviewed and analyzed. We are here to provide clarification on what was observed. A slide appeared on the screen behind him. Satellite image of the border region. At approximately 10:45 p.m. local time, the Mexican military conducted a training exercise involving aerial flares and illumination rounds. This exercise was conducted without prior notification to U.S. authorities, which was a violation of standard protocols. The Mexican government has apologized for the oversight. Another slide. Photo of military flares launching from what appeared to be a mobile platform. The lights observed by CBP personnel were these illumination rounds. They create bright, sustained light sources that can remain airborne for several minutes. When launched in sequence, they can create the appearance of coordinated movement. Dorian felt his jaw tighten. This was a lie. A blatant, obvious lie. Military flares didn't move in perfect formation. They didn't cross borders at consistent altitudes. They didn't cause temperature drops or time distortions. The man at the podium continued. Some personnel reported equipment malfunctions, including radio failures and camera errors. These have been attributed to electromagnetic interference from the flare's ignition systems. Standard testing protocols are being implemented to prevent similar issues in the future. Another slide. Technical diagram that meant nothing. All reports have been logged and filed appropriately. No further action is required. Personnel are reminded that speculation about unidentified phenomena is not productive and may undermine operational effectiveness. Focus should remain on primary mission responsibilities. Questions? A hand went up in the back. An older agent Dorian didn't recognize. What about the reports of time discrepancies? Multiple agents reported checking their watches and finding different times. The man in the suit barely paused. Stress-induced temporal distortion. When individuals are focused on unusual events, their perception of time can become unreliable. This is well documented in psychological literature. And the temperature drops? Another voice from the side. Desert microclimates. Temperature can vary significantly across short distances due to topographical features, air currents, and surface composition. Dorian wanted to stand up, call out the lies, present his data. But he knew it wouldn't matter. This wasn't a briefing seeking truth. This was a briefing establishing the official narrative. Anyone who contradicted it would be marking themselves as a problem. The man concluded his presentation. This matter is now closed. Return to your regular duties. Dismissed. The auditorium emptied slowly. Agents talking among themselves, some clearly skeptical, most just glad to get back to work. Dorian waited for Lena outside. Military flares, she said when she found him. That's the best they could come up with. It's not about believability. It's about having an official explanation on record. So what do? Same thing we've been doing. Keep documenting, keep collecting evidence, but we go deeper underground. No more radio chatter about anomalies. Everything stays off official channels. Marcus and Talia joined them. You believe any of that? Marcus asked. Not a word, Dorian said. But we can't fight it directly. We need irrefutable proof before we go public with anything. How much proof is enough? I don't know, but we're going to keep collecting until we have it. Over the next 2 weeks, the sightings stopped. Complete radio silence. No spheres, no temperature anomalies, no tarnished fence wire. It was like someone had flipped a switch and turned off the phenomenon. Dorian kept monitoring, kept taking temperature readings, kept checking the fence line. Nothing, just normal desert nights, normal patrols, normal everything. On August 16th, Lena called him. I think they're gone. What makes you say that? I can feel it. The desert feels different, emptier. Whatever was here, it's moved on. Dorian wanted to argue, but he knew what she meant. There was a quality to the air during those months when the spheres were active. A kind of anticipation, like the desert itself was holding its breath. That quality was gone now. Maybe they finished what they were doing, he said. Which was what? Mapping, surveying, observing? We don't know. Will they come back? I don't know that either. Dorian continued his research for another month. He compiled everything into a comprehensive document. Witness testimonies, temperature data, chemical analysis of the residue samples, timeline of sightings, maps showing the progression pattern. 147 pages of documentation. He encrypted it, backed it up to 3 separate locations, and stored the physical samples in a safe deposit box. Then he waited. September 2021. A researcher from New Mexico Tech named Dr. Andrea Morrison published a paper in an obscure scientific journal. The title, Unexplained Electromagnetic Anomalies Along the U.S.-Mexico Border, a 2-year survey. Dorian found the paper through one of his automated search alerts. He downloaded it immediately, started reading. Dr. Morrison had been conducting atmospheric research using a network of sensors along the border. Her instruments had detected unusual electromagnetic signatures during the same time period when Dorian and his team had been observing the spheres. The signatures showed a progression pattern, west to east, over time, exactly matching the visual sightings. Dorian called the number listed in the paper. Dr. Morrison answered on the third ring. "This is Andrea Morrison." "Dr. Morrison, my name is Dorian Texera. I read your paper on electromagnetic anomalies." "Oh, are you a researcher?" "No, I'm a border patrol agent, but I've been documenting unusual phenomena that correlate with your findings." Silence for a moment. Then, "What kind of phenomena?" "Visual observations, temperature anomalies, physical trace evidence, all following the same west to east pattern you identified." "You're talking about the lights?" "Yes." "How many observations?" 73 documented sightings across 8 months, multiple witnesses, temperature data, chemical analysis of residue samples." Another pause. "Mr. Texera, I'd like to meet with you. Can you come to Socorro?" "When?" "As soon as possible." Dorian drove to New Mexico 2 days later. Dr. Morrison's office was in a building on the edge of the tech campus, filled with computer equipment and sensor arrays. She was in her late 40s, gray-streaked hair pulled back, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She shook his hand, gestured to a chair. "Show me what you have." Dorian pulled out his tablet, loaded his comprehensive document. Dr. Morrison read for 30 minutes without speaking, occasionally making notes, asking for clarification on specific data points. When she finished, she sat back. "This is extraordinary. You've documented something I could only detect indirectly. The visual confirmation correlates perfectly with my electromagnetic readings. What do you think they are?" "I don't know, but they're not natural. The EM signatures don't match any known atmospheric or geological phenomena. And your temperature data suggests localized manipulation of thermal energy, which shouldn't be possible without massive power sources. Could it be military technology? Ours or someone else's?" "Not ours. I've consulted with colleagues in defense research. No one has technology that creates these signatures. As for foreign military, possible, but unlikely. The pattern is too systematic, too methodical. It suggests scientific observation rather than tactical reconnaissance." "So, what's the alternative?" Dr. Morrison met his eyes. "The alternative is that we're dealing with technology so far beyond our current understanding that we can't even properly categorize it." Dorian felt a chill despite the warm office. "You mean extraterrestrial?" "I mean non-human intelligence. Whether that's extraterrestrial, interdimensional, or something else entirely, I can't say. But the evidence suggests intelligence and purpose." They spent 4 more hours comparing data. Dr. Morrison's electromagnetic readings showed spikes that corresponded almost perfectly to Dorian's visual sightings. The progression pattern held across both data sets. "I want to publish this," Dr. Morrison said. "Your observations combined with my sensor data would make a compelling case. I can't be identified, my name, my agency, any of it. I'd lose my job and probably get investigated. Anonymous testimony, I can work with that. Let me draft something, send it to you for approval." Dorian agreed. They exchanged contact information, promised to stay in touch. On his drive back to Arizona, Dorian thought about what Dr. Morrison had said. Non-human intelligence. Technology beyond human understanding. Those spheres of shadowless light, moving along the border with methodical purpose. For months, he'd been collecting evidence, trying to prove that something unusual was happening, but he'd never let himself fully accept the implications. Now, with Dr. Morrison's scientific validation, he couldn't avoid it anymore. They weren't dealing with atmospheric phenomena or secret military projects. They were dealing with something genuinely unknown. Something that had spent over a year systematically observing the U.S.-Mexico border, collecting data, leaving traces. And now it was gone, finished with whatever it came to do. The question was, would it come back? October 2021. Dorian had stopped active monitoring, but he still checked his temperature maps occasionally. Old habits. He was reviewing data from the previous week when he noticed something odd. Post 562. Eastern edge of his original monitoring area. Temperature drop of 9 degrees, recorded by an automated sensor he'd left in place. Date and time. October 19th, 3:17 a.m. Dorian checked his notes. No visual sighting reported for that location or time, but the temperature anomaly was there, clear and undeniable. He called Lena. They're back. Are you sure? Temperature drop at post 562, eastern edge of the monitoring zone. That's almost at the New Mexico border. Exactly. They've moved east, continuing the pattern. Should we resume monitoring? Yeah, but carefully. I don't want to draw attention. Just basic observation, temperature checks, no big operations. Over the next 3 weeks, they documented 12 more temperature anomalies, all in the eastern section of the Arizona-Mexico border. The spheres were still active, still moving eastward, but they were being more discreet. Fewer visual sightings, more reliance on the lingering temperature traces. On November 8th, Lena saw one. She was at post 578, just a few miles from the New Mexico state line when the sphere appeared. Same pale blue-white glow, same shadowless illumination. But this time it didn't approach the fence. It stayed back, maybe 100 yards into Mexico, hovering low. Lena watched it for 10 minutes. It didn't pulse, didn't move, just hovered. Then it rose straight up, climbing to maybe 1,000 feet, and shot off to the east at incredible speed. She called Dorian immediately. It was different this time, more cautious, like it knew it was being watched. Maybe it learned, maybe it adapted its behavior based on our previous observations. That's a disturbing thought. Yeah. The sightings continued sporadically through November and December. Always in the eastern sections, always brief, always careful. Whatever intelligence controlled these spheres had definitely changed its approach. On December 30th, 2021, Dorian got a call from Dr. Morrison. Our paper was accepted. It's being published in the Journal of Atmospheric and Space Physics next month. What kind of response do you expect? Honestly, probably skepticism and dismissal from most of the scientific community, but it will be on record. Other researchers can access it, verify the data, conduct their own investigations. That's something, at least. There's one more thing. I'm expanding my sensor network into New Mexico and West Texas. If these phenomena continue eastward, I want to track them. Let me know what you find. I will, and Dorian, thank you. Without your observations, I never would have understood what my instruments were detecting. After he hung up, Dorian sat at his desk, thinking about the past 18 months. The first sighting with Lena, the temperature mapping, the mass observation on July 29th. The official dismissal, Dr. Morrison's paper. They'd documented something real, something important, and even though the official channels had shut them down, the evidence existed. The truth was out there, scattered across sensor logs and witness testimonies and chemical analysis reports. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was all they could do. Bear witness, collect evidence, refuse to let it be forgotten. Dorian opened his encrypted document, added a final entry. December 30th, 2021. Phenomenon continues. Progression pattern holding, moved into eastern Arizona/New Mexico border region. Behavioral adaptation noted. Spheres more cautious, fewer prolonged observations. Dr. Morrison's paper accepted for publication. Physical evidence secured in safe deposit box. Temperature sensors remain active. Monitoring continues. Whatever these lights are, wherever they came from, they were here. They observed us as we observed them. And someday someone will need this evidence. Someday the truth will matter. Until then, we watch. We document. We remember. January 2025. Dorian sat in a small office at Border Patrol headquarters, across from a woman in a dark suit. She'd introduced herself as Agent Catherine Morrison, no relation to Dr. Andrea Morrison, though Dorian wondered if that was true. Mr. Teixeira, I'm with Homeland Security's Advanced Threats Division. We're conducting a review of unusual incident reports from the past 5 years. I filed my reports through proper channels. Everything was documented according to protocol. I know. I've read them all. 73 separate observations between May 2021 and January 2022. Quite comprehensive. We were thorough. You were more than thorough. You were methodical. Temperature data, witness corroboration, chemical analysis. This isn't standard Border Patrol documentation. Dorian said nothing. Agent Morrison opened a file folder. The official position on those incidents is that they were misidentified military flares. I'm aware of the official position. Do you agree with it? Does it matter what I think? Yes, because I don't think they were flares either. Dorian looked at her carefully. Then, what do you think they were? I think they were exactly what you documented. Unidentified aerial phenomena exhibiting advanced technological capabilities. Possible non-human intelligence. That's quite a statement for a federal agent to make. We're establishing a task force, multi-agency, secure clearance. The mission is to investigate and document UAP activity along U.S. borders. Your observations and methodology caught our attention. We'd like to offer you a position. Doing what? What you've already been doing, but officially. With resources, support, and proper scientific collaboration. Dorian sat back. After 3 years of being dismissed, ignored, told he'd seen military flares, now they wanted his help. Why now? He asked. Because the phenomena have escalated. What you saw along the Arizona-Mexico border was just one incident sequence. We're now tracking similar patterns in Texas, New Mexico, and California. Multiple instances per month. We can't ignore it anymore. And my team? Montiel, Orozco, Ruiz, Guerrero, Park, all being offered positions. Dorian thought about it. He could say no, keep his head down, continue his regular patrol work. Or he could say yes, and finally have the resources to properly investigate what they'd witnessed. When do we start? Agent Morrison smiled. Tomorrow. Welcome to the Advanced Threats Division. Lena stood at the fence line, post 492, where it all started. She'd accepted the position with ATD, same as Dorian. They were being transferred to a specialized unit based out of Fort Huachuca. The desert was quiet tonight. No strange lights, no temperature anomalies. Just stars and silence. But she knew they'd be back. The spheres, or whatever they were. They'd shown a pattern, a purpose. They'd spent over a year systematically mapping the border, collecting data, observing. The question was, what would they do with that data? Lena pulled out her phone, opened the encrypted file where she kept her personal notes, added one final entry, January 15th, 2025. Transferring to ATD tomorrow. Dorian and the rest of the team are coming too. After 3 years of documentation and dismissal, we're finally being taken seriously. Whatever those lights were, whatever they wanted, we'll be ready if they come back. Because they will come back. I know it. We'll be watching. She hit save, pocketed her phone, took one last look at the empty desert. Somewhere out there, in the darkness between nations, something waited. Something patient. Something that had all the time in the world. But now, so did they. Lena turned and walked back to her truck, leaving the fence line behind. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new mysteries, new questions. But tonight, the desert was quiet. Ralph Huxford had been driving 18-wheelers for 31 years. Started when he was 22, fresh out of the Army, looking for work that paid decent and kept him moving. 3 decades later, he was still at it, hauling freight across the Southwest, living on truck stop coffee and gas station burritos, watching the miles tick by on roads he knew better than his own neighborhood. March 14th, 2022. Monday night. Ralph was eastbound on Interstate 10, about 40 miles west of Lordsburg, New Mexico. He'd picked up a load of construction materials in Phoenix that afternoon. Destination El Paso. Standard run, one he'd done maybe 200 times over the years. The clock on his dash read 11:47 p.m. Temperature outside was still in the low 70s, warm for March, but not unusual. Ralph had his window cracked, country music playing low on the radio, cruise control set at 68 mph. The road was empty. He hadn't passed another vehicle in 20 minutes. Just him, his truck, and the dark New Mexico desert stretching out on both sides of the 2-lane blacktop. Ralph checked his mirrors. Habit, even when there was nothing to see. Both clear. He reached for his coffee thermos, took a long drink. Cold by now, but it was caffeine, which was all that mattered. He had another 2 hours before his scheduled rest stop in Deeming. That's when his engine died. Not sputtered, not coughed, just stopped. 1 second the diesel was running smooth, the next there was silence except for road noise as the truck began coasting. Ralph's first instinct was to check the gauges. Fuel, 3/4 full. Oil pressure, 0 because the engine wasn't running. Temperature dropping as the engine cooled. Battery, good. No warning lights on the dash except the check engine light which had just come on. He tried to restart the engine, turned the key. Nothing, not even a click. The electrical system was working. Lights were on, radio still playing, dash illuminated. But the starter wouldn't engage. Ralph put on his hazards, steered the coasting truck onto the shoulder. 70 tons of truck and cargo took a while to stop, but he had plenty of road. He rolled for maybe half a mile before coming to a complete stop, right next to mile marker 72. He turned off the radio, sat in the sudden quiet, thinking. He wasn't out of fuel. Battery was good. Electrical system working. But the engine was completely dead, and the starter wouldn't even try to turn over. Ralph grabbed his phone, checked the signal. 1 bar, better than nothing. He pulled up his company's roadside assistance number, was about to dial when he noticed something odd. The air felt different. Heavier. Like the pressure had changed, the way it does before a thunderstorm. But the sky was clear. He could see stars through his windshield. He looked at his mirrors again. Nothing behind him, nothing ahead. Empty highway in both directions. Ralph felt the hairs on his arms standing up. Not from cold, from something else. An instinct he'd learned to trust during his Army days. The feeling you get when something's wrong but you can't quite identify what. He grabbed his flashlight, opened his door, stepped down from the cab. The desert air hit him, still warm, carrying the smell of creosote and dust. He walked around to the front of his truck, popped the hood, climbed up to check the engine. Everything looked normal. No loose wires, no leaking fluids, no obvious damage. Ralph knew diesel engines. He'd done plenty of his own repairs over the years. Whatever had killed his truck, it wasn't anything visible. He was about to climb down when he heard it. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. No wind, no insects, no distant traffic. Even his own breathing seemed muffled, like the air itself was absorbing sound. Ralph froze, flashlight in hand, listening. The desert was never truly quiet. There was always something making noise. But right now, there was nothing. It was like someone had hit a mute button on the entire world. He looked up. Above his truck, maybe 300 feet up, was a light. Orange, glowing, shaped like a triangle with the point aimed down toward him. Ralph stood there on the truck's running board, staring. The light wasn't moving, wasn't making any sound, just hovering, perfectly still, directly over his disabled vehicle. He'd seen aircraft before. Helicopters, jets, small planes. This wasn't any of those. The light was too steady, too perfect, and there was no sound. No rotor wash, no engine noise, nothing. Ralph climbed down from the truck, backed away a few steps to get a better view. The triangular light was clearer from this angle. Each side looked to be maybe 40 feet long, edges crisp and well-defined. The orange glow emanated from the entire surface, not from a single point source, and it cast no shadow. Ralph turned his flashlight on the ground beneath the triangle. His flashlight beam created a clear shadow from a nearby creosote bush. But the orange light from above? Nothing. The desert floor looked exactly the same, whether the light was there or not. He pulled out his phone, opened the camera app, aimed it at the triangle. Through the screen, he saw the dark sky, his truck, the highway. No triangle. He zoomed in, tried again. Still nothing. Ralph lowered his phone, looked up with his own eyes. The triangle was still there, clear as day. "Okay," he said aloud, his voice sounding flat in the dead air. "This is officially weird." He checked his watch. 11:51 p.m. 4 minutes since his engine had died. He made a mental note of the time, kept watching the light. The triangle didn't move for maybe 30 seconds. Then it began to descend. Slowly, smoothly, coming down toward his truck. Ralph's instinct was to run, get away from the truck, get away from whatever that thing was. But his legs wouldn't cooperate. Not from fear, though there was plenty of that, but from something else. Like his body had decided on its own that running was pointless. The triangle stopped descending when it was maybe 100 feet up. This close, Ralph could see details he'd missed before. The surface wasn't perfectly smooth. There were patterns in it, like geometric shapes layered on top of each other, and the edges pulsed slightly, brightening and dimming in a slow rhythm. Ralph tried to move. His legs responded this time, barely. He took a step backward, then another. The triangle didn't react, just hovered there, silent and still. He looked at his phone again. The screen was frozen. The time display showed 11:51 hadn't advanced. He pressed buttons. Nothing happened. The phone was locked up completely. Ralph's watch still worked, though. He checked it. 11:52 p.m. He looked back up at the triangle. It was rising now, climbing back to its original altitude. The ascent was smooth, no acceleration, just steady upward movement. When it reached maybe 300 feet, it stopped, held position for another 10 seconds. Then it shot off to the east so fast Ralph barely tracked the movement. One moment it was there, the next it was a point of light on the horizon. Then it was gone. The silence broke. Suddenly Ralph could hear the desert again. Wind moving through brush, a distant truck on the highway, his own breathing loud in his ears. His truck's engine started. Just started. On its own. Ralph hadn't touched the ignition, hadn't even climbed back into the cab. But the diesel engine roared to life, idling smoothly like nothing had happened. Ralph stood there, phone in one hand, flashlight in the other, staring at his running truck. He checked his watch, 11:54 p.m., 3 minutes. From engine failure to restart, 3 minutes had passed. But it felt longer. Felt like at least 10 minutes, maybe 15. He walked back to the cab, climbed in, looked at the dash clock. 11:54 p.m. Matched his watch. He checked his phone, still frozen on 11:51. He powered it off, waited, powered it back on. It booted up normally, and when it finished loading, the time display read 11:55 p.m. Ralph sat there, engine running, trying to process what had just happened. He checked his gauges, everything normal. Oil pressure good, temperature normal, fuel level unchanged. No warning lights, no indication anything had been wrong. He put the truck in gear, pulled back onto the highway. The engine responded perfectly, smooth acceleration, no hesitation. Whatever had killed it was gone. Ralph drove for another 10 miles before he pulled over again, this time at a rest area. He needed to think, needed to figure out what to report, because he had to report something. Company policy required him to document any mechanical failures. But how was he supposed to write this up? Engine died, mysterious triangle light appeared, engine restarted on its own. He sat at a picnic table outside the rest area bathroom, notepad in hand, trying to find the right words. Finally, he just wrote what happened, exactly as it happened. No speculation, no interpretation, just facts. March 14th, 11:47 p.m. Engine failure, mile marker 72, I-10, eastbound. No warning. Complete shutdown, no visible mechanical issue. Engine restarted on its own at 11:54 p.m. Total, downtime, 3 minutes. Unusual, light observed overhead during incident, possibly aircraft. No damage, no injuries, vehicle functioning normally. He took a photo of his note, texted it to his dispatcher. The response came back 2 minutes later. Copy. Get checked at next truck stop. File full report in morning. Ralph pocketed his phone, got back in his truck, continued toward El Paso, but he couldn't stop thinking about that triangle. The way it had hovered silently overhead. The way his phone hadn't been able to capture it. The way it had cast no shadow. The way his engine had started on its own the moment it left. Miles Rosado ran a mobile diesel repair service based out of Deming, New Mexico. He'd been doing it for 16 years, fixing broken-down trucks on the side of highways, in truck stop parking lots anywhere drivers needed help. It was hard work, unpredictable hours, but it paid well and kept him independent. March 15th, 2022. Miles was home, asleep, when his phone rang at 1:47 a.m. He fumbled for it in the dark, checked the caller ID. A dispatch. Rosado Mobile Repair. Miles, we've got a driver on I-10, westbound around mile marker 65. Engine problems. Can you get there? What kind of problems? He says his engine died, restarted on its own, now it's running rough. Worried it'll die again. I'm 40 minutes out. Tell him to pull over somewhere safe and wait. Will do. Thanks, Miles. Miles got dressed, grabbed his tool bag and diagnostic computer, headed out to his service truck. The night was clear and warm, typical for March. He pulled onto I-10, headed west, watching for the disabled truck. He found it at mile marker 68, big rig, lights on, pulled well off onto the shoulder. Miles parked behind it, grabbed his equipment, walked up to the driver's door. The driver rolled down his window. Older guy, probably in his 50s, wearing a worn baseball cap. He looked tired but alert. "You Rosado?" "That's me. You're having engine problems?" "Yeah. Died on me about 2 hours ago. Restarted itself, been running rough ever since. I made it this far, but didn't want to push it." Any warning lights?" "Check engine light came on when it died. Went off when it restarted. Nothing since then." Miles climbed up, checked the dash. Everything looked normal. "Mind if I run a diagnostic?" "Go ahead." Miles plugged his computer into the truck's diagnostic port, pulled up the error logs. There were 2 codes stored, one for electrical system interruption, one for fuel system fault. Both time-stamped at 11:47 p.m. Says here you lost power to the fuel pump and the electrical system had an interruption, both at the same time. That's when the engine died. But there's no secondary fault code. Usually if something fails, you get multiple errors as the system tries to compensate. This just shows the initial failure and then nothing. So what does that mean? Means something cut power to multiple systems simultaneously, then restored it. That shouldn't be possible unless you had a dead short somewhere, but your battery would have drained if that happened. Miles checked the battery voltage. You're at 12.6 volts, fully charged, no drain. The driver nodded slowly. "So you're saying my truck shut down for no reason and started up for no reason. That's what the data shows." Miles climbed down, walked around the truck, checked the engine compartment. Everything looked fine. No loose connections, no signs of electrical burning, no fuel leaks. He came back to the driver's window. "I can't find anything wrong. All systems are functioning normally now. You said it's been running rough since the restart." "Yeah, not bad, but I can feel it. Like it's missing every few seconds." Miles climbed up into the cab, listened to the engine idle. There it was, a slight hesitation every 4 or 5 seconds. Subtle, but definitely there. That's a fuel delivery issue. Pump might be going bad, or there's air in the line. He ran another diagnostic. No fault codes. "But your system says everything's fine. Can you fix it?" "I can replace the fuel filter, check the lines, make sure everything's clean. But if the pump's failing, you'll need to get that done at a shop. I don't carry those in my truck." "How long to do the filter?" 20 minutes. "Do it." Miles grabbed his tools, got to work. While he was replacing the fuel filter, the driver stood outside, smoking a cigarette, watching the empty highway. "You been doing this long?" the driver asked. 16 years, you?" 31. Ralph Huxford. He extended his hand. Miles shook it. "Miles Rosado, so what happened out here tonight?" Ralph hesitated, took a drag on his cigarette. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." "Try me. I've heard a lot of weird stories on this highway." Ralph told him. The engine dying, the silence, the triangle light hovering overhead, the way his phone couldn't capture it, the way the engine had restarted on its own when the light left. Miles stopped working, looked up at Ralph. "A triangle?" "Orange light, maybe 40 feet on each side, silent. Hovered right over my truck for about 3 minutes. And your engine started by itself when it left?" "Yeah. I didn't even touch the ignition." Miles set down his wrench. "What time did this happen?" "Engine died at 11:47. Triangle showed up maybe 30 seconds later. Left at 11:54. That's when the engine restarted." Miles checked his watch, did the math. "I got the call at 1:47. That's 2 hours after your engine died. Why'd you wait so long to call?" "I didn't wait. I called Topo A right after it happened. Must have been around midnight. Miles pulled out his phone, checked his call log. The dispatch call had come in at 1:47 a.m. He showed Ralph. This is when they called me. Ralph pulled out his own phone, checked his call history. I called them at 12:03 a.m., see? Right here. Miles looked at Ralph's phone. The call was time-stamped 12:03 a.m., but Miles's call from dispatch was time-stamped 1:47 a.m. That's almost a 2-hour gap between when you called and when I got the call. What were you doing in between? Nothing. I drove from mile marker 72 to here, pulled over, called AAA, waited for you, maybe 20 minutes total. Ralph, according to our phones, almost 2 hours passed. Ralph stared at him. That's not possible. I checked my watch multiple times. It was maybe 20, 30 minutes. Miles checked his own watch against his phone. They matched 2:14 a.m. He looked at Ralph's watch. What time do you have? Ralph checked. 2:03 a.m. My watch says 2:14. That's an 11-minute difference. They stood there in the dark beside Ralph's truck, both checking and rechecking their watches and phones, trying to make the numbers make sense. Okay, Miles said finally. This is officially weird. You said your engine failed at 11:47? That's what my dash clock said, and my watch matched it. And according to the diagnostic log, your electrical system failed at exactly 11:47. So, that part's consistent. But the time after that got weird. Yeah, Miles thought about it. You said 3 minutes passed between engine failure and restart, but it felt longer? Felt like at least 10 minutes, maybe 15. And I'm missing almost 2 hours between when you called AA and when I got the call. Plus, our watches are now 11 minutes different, even though we're standing right here together. Ralph took another drag on his cigarette. You think that triangle had something to do with it? I think something affected time, or our perception of time, or both. That sounds crazy. Yeah, but so does an engine that shuts down and restarts itself with no mechanical failure. Miles finished replacing the fuel filter, checked the engine. The hesitation was gone. It was running smooth now. Try it. Rev the engine. Ralph climbed in, pressed the accelerator. The engine responded perfectly, smooth and powerful. Feels good, Ralph said. Whatever air was in the line is gone now. Should be fine. Miles packed up his tools. But Ralph, you should document everything that happened tonight. Write it down while it's fresh. Dates, times, what you saw, everything. Why? Because if something like this happens again, to you or to someone else, you'll want a record. You believe me about the triangle? Miles looked up at the clear night sky, the stars bright and sharp in the desert darkness. I've been working this highway for 16 years. I've seen things I can't explain. Lights in the sky, trucks with electrical failures that make no sense, drivers who swear they lost time but can't prove it. So, yeah, I believe you. Ralph nodded slowly. Thanks for fixing the truck and for not thinking I'm crazy. You're welcome. But do me a favor, if you see that triangle again, take photos, multiple angles, and check your watch every 30 seconds, write down the times. You want me to document it? I want everyone to document it. Because I think this has been happening for a while and nobody's connecting the dots. Miles drove back to Deming, his service truck rumbling along the empty highway. He kept checking his watch, making sure time was passing normally. It was. But something about Ralph's story bothered him. The 11-minute time difference between their watches. That wasn't perception or memory. That was measurable, verifiable. Somehow, Ralph had lost 11 minutes that Miles hadn't lost. When Miles got home, he didn't go back to bed. Instead, he sat at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee, opened his laptop, and started searching. I-10 New Mexico engine failure. Trucks stopped unexplained. UFO sightings, I-10, missing time truck drivers. He found more than he expected. Forum posts from truckers describing similar experiences. Engines dying for no reason. Electrical failures. Time discrepancies. And lights in the sky. Spheres, triangles, formations of multiple objects. Most of the posts were dismissed as hoaxes or misidentifications, but buried in the comments were people claiming they'd experienced the same things. Same highway. Same symptoms. Same missing time. Miles created a document, started logging what he found. Dates when available, locations, descriptions. By 5 a.m. he had 17 separate accounts, all from I-10 between Lordsburg and Deeming, all from the past 3 years. Something was happening on this stretch of highway. Something consistent enough that it kept appearing in truck driver stories and UFO forums. And now Miles had met someone who'd experienced it firsthand. He saved his document, backed it up to the cloud, and made himself a promise. The next time he got a call about an unexplained engine failure on I-10, he was going to ask more questions. Document more details. Start building a real case. Because Ralph Huxford's missing time and the triangle light weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a pattern. And Miles Rosado was going to figure out what that pattern meant. April the 2nd, 2022. Miles got another call at 3:22 a.m. Different dispatcher, same story. Truck with engine problems on I-10, this time around mile marker 58. Miles drove out, found a truck similar to Ralph's. Big rig hauling shipping containers. The driver was a woman in her 40s, standing outside her cab, arms crossed, looking frustrated. "Thanks for coming out," she said. "I'm Sandra Vega. Engine just quit on me. No warning, nothing. Tried to restart it, wouldn't turn over." "Did it start on its own?" Miles asked. Sandra looked at him oddly. "No, why would it?" "Never mind. When did it die?" "About 20 minutes ago. I called dispatch right away." Miles checked his watch. 3:22 a.m. He ran diagnostics on Sandra's truck. Same error codes as Ralph's. Electrical system interruption, fuel pump fault, both simultaneous. "This is the second truck this month with the exact same failure pattern," Miles said, more to himself than to Sandra. "What causes it?" "I don't know. There's no mechanical reason for both systems to fail simultaneously." Miles replaced Sandra's fuel filter, checked her electrical system, got the engine running. Unlike Ralph's truck, there was no rough idle afterward. Everything ran perfectly. "You're good to go," Miles said. "But I need to ask you something. Did you see anything unusual before your engine died?" "Like what?" "Lights in the sky. Aircraft. Anything out of the ordinary." Sandra shook her head. "Nothing. Just driving. Then the engine quit. Why?" "Another driver had a similar failure a few weeks ago. He reported seeing something odd right before it happened." "What kind of something?" Miles hesitated. If he told her about Ralph's triangle, she'd think he was crazy. "Just unusual lights. Might have been aircraft. I didn't see anything, but I had my eyes on the road. I wasn't looking up." After Sandra drove off, Miles sat in his service truck thinking. 2 incidents. Same location within a few miles. Same failure pattern. But only Ralph had seen the triangle. Maybe Sandra hadn't been looking. Or maybe the triangle hadn't been there. Or maybe it had been there but chose not to reveal itself. Miles drove back toward Deming, watching the sky. Nothing but stars. But now he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching back. May 18th, 2022. Ralph Huxford was back on I-10, westbound this time, hauling furniture from El Paso to Phoenix. It was 2:14 a.m. and he was making good time. Clear night, no traffic, cruise control set at 70. He was approaching mile marker 72, the exact spot where his engine had died back in March, when he felt it again. That pressure change, that heaviness in the air. Ralph's hands tightened on the steering wheel. No, not again. His engine didn't die this time, but his speedometer started dropping. Not because he was braking, his foot was steady on the accelerator. The engine was running, power was there, but the truck was slowing down like something was holding it back. Ralph checked his gauges. Everything normal, engine RPM steady. But his speed had dropped from 70 to 60, now 55, now 50. He looked in his mirrors. The triangle was back. Orange light, same size as before, hovering maybe 200 feet behind his truck. Following him, Ralph's mouth went dry. He pressed harder on the accelerator. The engine responded, RPM climbing, but the truck's speed continued to drop. 40, 45 mph. 40, 35. The triangle closed the distance, now maybe 100 feet back. This close, Ralph could see it clearly in his passenger side mirror. Perfect triangular shape, edges glowing. Surface covered in those geometric patterns. 30 mph. 25. The truck was barely moving now despite the engine running at high RPM. Ralph grabbed his phone, held it up, tried to take a photo of the mirror showing the triangle. The phone's screen went black. Not off, just black, like it had stopped working. 20 mph. 15. The truck was coasting now, barely crawling forward. Ralph made a decision. He steered onto the shoulder, put the truck in neutral, set the parking brake. If this thing was going to do something, he'd rather be stopped than rolling. The engine kept running. That was different from last time. But the truck was motionless, and the triangle was still there, now hovering directly behind his trailer. Maybe 50 feet back. Ralph watched it in his mirror. The orange glow pulsed slowly. That same rhythm as before. 5 seconds between pulses. His radio crackled. Static, then a voice. Distorted, mechanical, wrong. Diagnostic, pattern, compliance. Ralph grabbed his CB radio mic. Who is this? Identify yourself. More static, then that same mechanical voice. Energy signature, logged, proceed. Proceed where? What do you want? The static cut off. The triangle rose vertically, climbing maybe 500 feet in seconds. Then it shot off to the east, faster than anything Ralph had ever seen. His truck lurched forward. Not because he'd released the brake, he hadn't touched it. The truck just moved, like something had been holding it and suddenly let go. Ralph sat there, engine running, truck in neutral with the brake still engaged, trying to understand what had just happened. He checked his phone. Black screen. He powered it off, powered it back on. It booted normally. He checked his watch. 2:19 a.m. 5 minutes since he'd first felt that pressure change. But it had felt like 2, maybe 3 minutes at most. Ralph released the parking brake, put the truck in gear, pulled back onto the highway. The engine responded perfectly. Whatever had been slowing him down was gone. He drove for another hour before pulling over at a truck stop in Lordsburg. He needed coffee, needed to think, needed to write this down before he forgot details. In the truck stop diner, sitting in a booth with a notepad and burned coffee, Ralph documented everything. Time, location, what he'd seen, what he'd felt, that weird radio transmission. The CB radio voice bothered him most. What had it said? Diagnostic pattern? Energy signature logged? Those weren't random words. They implied purpose, intention, measurement. Like something was testing him, or testing his truck, or testing something else he couldn't even identify. Ralph finished his notes, took a photo of the pages, sent it to his own email. Then he did something he'd been putting off since March. He searched for Miles Rosado's phone number, found it on a mobile repair website. He called. Miles answered on the third ring, voice thick with sleep. Rosado Mobile Repair. Miles, this is Ralph Huxford, the driver you helped back in March? Ralph, yeah, I remember. What's wrong? It happened again. Same triangle, but this time it followed me, slowed my truck down, and I heard a voice on my CB radio. Silence for a moment. Then Miles, sounding fully awake now. Tell me everything, Ralph told him. Miles listened without interrupting, occasionally asking for clarification on specific details. When Ralph finished, Miles said, "Where are you now?" "Truck stop in Lordsburg. I'm coming to you. Don't leave. Order me a coffee. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Miles arrived in 25. He found Ralph in the booth, notepad open, looking exhausted. "Thanks for coming," Ralph said. "Of course." Miles sat down, grabbed the coffee Ralph had ordered for him. "Okay, you said your truck slowed down even though the engine was running." "Yeah, like something was putting resistance on it. I was running at high RPM but barely moving." "And the triangle was behind you?" "About 50 feet back when I stopped. Closer than last time." "What about the CB transmission? Tell me exactly what you heard." Ralph read from his notes. "Diagnostic pattern compliance. Energy signature logged. Proceed." That's as close as I can remember. Miles pulled out his own notepad, wrote it down. "Those aren't random words. That's technical language. Like something was running a test and reporting results." "That's what I thought. But a test of what?" "I don't know, but I think we need to find other drivers who've experienced this. Build a database. See if there's a pattern." "How do we do that?" "I'll start asking questions. Every time I get called out for an unexplained engine failure, I'll ask about lights, missing time, anything unusual. You do the same, talk to other drivers, see if anyone has stories." Ralph nodded. "And then what?" "Then we figure out what these triangles want. Because they're clearly doing something deliberate, something systematic." Over the next 2 months, Miles and Ralph compiled data. Miles asked every driver he serviced about unusual experiences. Ralph talked to fellow truckers at rest stops and truck stops, asking careful questions, gauging reactions. They found 6 more accounts, all I-10 between Lordsburg and Deming, all involving engine problems, failures, slowdowns, electrical issues. 3 drivers had seen lights, 2 triangles, 1 sphere. 2 had experienced missing time. 1 had heard static on his CB radio but no clear words. Miles created a detailed spreadsheet. Date, time, location, driver name, description, duration, any unusual effects. The pattern was clear. Incidents occurred primarily between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m., always in the same 15-mile stretch of highway. "It's targeting this specific area," Miles said, showing Ralph the data over breakfast at a diner in Deming. "Mile markers 58 to 72. Why this section?" "There's nothing here," Ralph said. "Just desert and highway." "Exactly. No cities, no military bases, no major landmarks. So why here?" They didn't have an answer. But they kept collecting data, kept asking questions, kept watching the sky whenever they drove that stretch of I-10. On July 9, 2022, everything changed. Miles was driving home from a service call eastbound on I-10 at 1:47 a.m. when he saw them. Not one triangle. 6 of them. All orange, all identical, arranged in 2 parallel lines of 3. Hovering over the highway about a quarter mile ahead. He slowed down, pulled over, grabbed his phone. This time, he'd be ready. He had a high-quality camera app installed, settings optimized for night photography. He opened the app, aimed his phone at the triangles. Through the screen, he could see them. Faint, but there. Finally, something that would actually photograph. Miles took a dozen photos, then switched to video. The triangles held their formation for maybe a minute, then began moving. They drifted east, maintaining their parallel lines, traveling maybe 30 mph. Miles followed them. He stayed on the shoulder, lights on, hazards flashing, recording as he drove. The triangles led him east for 3 miles, then stopped over mile marker 64. Other vehicles were pulling over now. Miles counted 4 trucks and 2 cars, all stopped, all presumably watching the triangles. This wasn't just him and Ralph anymore. This was multiple independent witnesses seeing the same thing at the same time. The triangles held position over mile marker 64 for 2 minutes. Then, one by one from west to east, they rose vertically. Each triangle climbed maybe 1,000 feet, then shot off to the north at incredible speed. When the last one left, Miles checked his video. Still recording. He stopped it, reviewed the footage. The triangles were visible. Not clear, kind of fuzzy and washed out, but definitely there. Proof. Actual visual proof. He got back on the highway, drove to where the other vehicles had pulled over. 2 trucks had already left, but 1 truck and both cars were still there. Miles pulled in behind them, got out. A truck driver and 2 older couples were standing together looking at the sky, talking excitedly. "Did you see that?" one of the women asked Miles. "Yeah, I got video. We tried to take pictures," the truck driver said, "but they're too dim, barely visible in the photos. I used a special camera app, night mode, long exposure, got something at least." They exchanged contact information. The truck driver was named Dennis Pollard, been driving for 20 years, never seen anything like this. The couples were tourists from Ohio, driving cross-country, thought they were hallucinating until they saw other vehicles pulling over. "Did anyone's vehicle malfunction?" Miles asked. They all shook their heads. "Anyone lose time? Check your watches." Everyone checked. Their phones all agreed. 1:52 a.m. No time discrepancies this time. "So they can be here without causing equipment failures," Miles said, thinking out loud. "Or they chose not to." "What are they?" one of the men from Ohio asked. "I don't know, but I've been tracking incidents on this highway for months. This isn't the first time people have seen these triangles. Just the first time so many people saw them at once." Miles got everyone's phone numbers and email addresses, promised to share his video footage. Then he drove straight to Ralph's house in Las Cruces, called ahead to make sure he was awake. Ralph met him at the door in pajama pants and a t-shirt. "You sounded urgent on the phone." "I got footage, clear footage. 6 triangles, multiple witnesses, everything documented." They sat at Ralph's kitchen table, Miles playing the video on his phone. The triangles were visible throughout, fuzzy orange shapes maintaining formation, moving east, hovering, then departing. "This is it," Ralph said. "This is proof. Not proof of what they are, but proof that they exist, that multiple people can see them simultaneously. That's a start. What do we do with it? Post it online, send it to news stations, make it public before someone tells us not to." Miles uploaded the video to 3 different platforms: YouTube, Twitter, Reddit. He emailed it to local news stations in Las Cruces, Deming, and Lordsburg. He shared it in trucking forums and UFO discussion groups. Within hours, it had thousands of views. By the next morning, a news station in Las Cruces called him for an interview. The Las Cruces news station sent a reporter and camera crew to meet Miles at the site where he'd filmed the triangles. They interviewed him on the shoulder of I-10, mile marker 64 visible behind him. "What exactly did you see that night?" the reporter asked. Miles described it. 6 orange triangles in formation, hovering over the highway, multiple witnesses. He showed his video, explained how he'd used special camera settings to capture what regular phone cameras missed. "And you believe these were unidentified flying objects?" "I believe they were objects I couldn't identify. Whether they're aircraft, drones, atmospheric phenomena, or something else, I don't know. But they were real, and multiple people saw them." The story aired that evening. Miles's video played on local news, his interview edited down to 30 seconds. The station labeled it "Mystery Lights over I-10, and included a skeptical comment from an astronomer suggesting they were probably satellites or debris. Miles didn't care about the skepticism. The point was that it was out there, public, on record. Ralph called him after the broadcast. "You did good. Now people know this is happening." "Yeah, but watch what happens next. Either we'll get flooded with similar reports or someone will try to shut this down." Both happened. Over the next week, Miles received 47 emails from drivers claiming they'd seen lights on I-10 or experienced unexplained engine problems. Some accounts were clearly embellished or completely fabricated, but about a dozen seemed credible, detailed, consistent with the pattern Miles and Ralph had been documenting. Then, on July 18th, Miles got a different kind of call. "Mr. Rosado, this is Captain Frank Martinez with the New Mexico State Police. I need to speak with you about your recent media appearances regarding unidentified lights on Interstate 10. "Okay, am I in trouble?" "No, sir, but we've been receiving numerous calls about vehicles stopping on the highway to look at the sky. This creates a safety hazard. We're asking you to refrain from encouraging this behavior." "I didn't encourage anyone to stop. I just reported what I saw." "I understand. But your video has generated significant public interest, and we're concerned about copycat incidents or hoaxes. So, you're asking me to take the video down?" "We're asking you to consider the public safety implications." Miles hung up, immediately called Ralph. "State Police just told me to stop talking about the triangles." "Can they do that?" "Probably not legally, but they're putting pressure on me." "What are you going to do?" "Keep the video up, keep collecting data, but maybe be more careful about who I talk to." The media attention faded after a week. A new story took over the news cycle, and Miles's triangle video became old news. But the emails kept coming. Drivers reporting lights, engine problems, missing time. Miles documented each one, added it to his growing database. By the end of July, he had 73 separate accounts spanning from late 2019 to present. The pattern was undeniable. Something was happening on I-10 between Lordsburg and Deming, primarily between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m., and it had been happening for at least 3 years. August 2022. Ralph Huxford was getting ready to retire. 32 years of driving trucks, over 3 million miles logged, and he was done. He'd put in his notice, arranged to sell his truck, started planning what to do with his time. But he couldn't let go of the triangle mystery. He met with Miles one last time before his retirement became official. They sat at their usual diner in Deming, spreadsheets and notes spread across the table. 73 accounts, Miles said. "And that's just what we've documented. How many people had experiences but never reported them? Probably hundreds. Most drivers won't file reports about UFOs. They think it'll make them look crazy or affect their insurance. So we're seeing a fraction of the actual incidents." "Yeah," Ralph leaned back. "I've been thinking about what that CB transmission said. Diagnostic pattern. Energy signature logged. What if that's exactly what they're doing? Running diagnostics. testing something. Testing what? I don't know. Our vehicles? Our technology? Us? Miles considered it. The engine failures could be tests. Shut down the power systems. See how we react, measure something, restart everything. Like a scientist running experiments. And the missing time might be part of it. Maybe time actually passes differently near these things, or maybe they're doing something that affects our perception. Which would mean they're not just observing us. They're actively interacting with us in ways we can't fully comprehend. They sat in silence for a moment, both thinking about the implications. "You're retiring," Miles said finally. "What are you going to do with all this data?" "Give it to you. Keep collecting, keep documenting. Eventually, someone in authority will have to take it seriously. And if they don't..." Ralph smiled. "Then at least we know the truth. That's worth something." They shook hands, and Ralph drove away from Deming for the last time as a professional truck driver. But he kept his notes, kept his photographs, kept his memories of those orange triangles hovering in the New Mexico night. September through December 2022. Miles continued his mobile repair work, continued asking questions, continued documenting incidents. The reports kept coming, not as frequently as during the summer, but steady, maybe 2 or 3 per month. In January 2023, something new happened. A state trooper reported seeing triangles while on patrol near mile marker 67. Official report documented with dash cam footage. The footage was poor quality, just vague shapes in the distance, but it was official law enforcement acknowledgement. Miles reached out to the trooper, a man named Officer Raymond Soto. They met for coffee, compared notes. "I've heard about your video," Soto said. "Seen the reports. At first I thought it was all nonsense. Then I saw them myself. What convinced you they were real? The way they moved? I've seen drones, helicopters, planes, flares. These were none of those. They moved with precision, perfect formation, then shot off faster than anything I've seen." "Did your vehicle malfunction?" "No, but my radio went to static for about 30 seconds. Started working again when the triangles left." "Missing time? Maybe. I checked my dash cam timestamp against my watch. 2-minute discrepancy, could be a glitch, could be something else." Miles added Soto's account to his database. 89 documented incidents now, spanning over 3 years. In March 2023, exactly 1 year after Ralph's first encounter, Miles was driving through that same stretch of I-10 when he felt it. The pressure change. The heavy air. He pulled over immediately, grabbed his camera, waited. 3 triangles appeared, hovering in formation over mile marker 72. Miles photographed them, recorded video, documented everything. They stayed for 4 minutes, then departed. Miles checked his watch. 11:51 p.m. He checked his phone. 11:56 p.m. 5-minute discrepancy. He sat in his truck reviewing his footage, thinking about the past year. All the accounts he'd collected. All the drivers who'd seen things they couldn't explain. All the missing time, the engine failures, the lights that shouldn't exist. Whatever was happening on this stretch of highway, it was real. It was ongoing, and it showed no signs of stopping. Miles called Ralph, even though it was late. "They're back, same spot where your engine died last year." "I figured they would be. They seem to like that area." "Why, though? What's special about mile marker 72? "I've been thinking about that. Maybe nothing special about it to us, but something special about it to them. Maybe there's something underground, or something about the geology. Or maybe they just picked a random spot and kept using it. Or maybe they're marking territory. That's a disturbing thought." "Yeah." They talked for another 30 minutes, comparing theories, discussing possibilities. Neither had real answers, but they both knew one thing: this wasn't going to stop. The triangles would keep coming, keep testing, keep doing whatever they were doing, and Miles would keep documenting it, because someone had to. Someone had to bear witness to what was happening out here in the empty miles between towns, in the hours when most people were asleep. Someone had to remember. March 2024. Miles Rosado stood at mile marker 72, exactly 2 years after Ralph Huxford's first encounter. It was 11:47 p.m. He'd come here deliberately, at this exact time, to see if the pattern held. He waited. At 11:49 p.m., the familiar pressure change hit. Miles felt the heaviness in the air, the sensation of being watched. He looked up. One triangle. Orange glow. Hovering, maybe 300 feet up, directly over the highway. Miles didn't reach for his camera. He'd documented these things enough. Instead, he just watched, trying to understand. The triangle pulsed. 5 seconds between pulses. 18 pulses total, then it stopped. Stayed bright for 30 seconds. Then collapsed inward, contracting to a point of light, and vanished. Miles checked his watch. 11:54 p.m. 7 minutes had passed, though it had felt like 3. He got back in his truck, pulled onto the highway, continued toward Deming. Behind him, mile marker 72 sat quiet and empty, marking a spot where something impossible had happened over and over for the past 3 years. Miles had collected 147 documented accounts now. Engine failures, lights in the sky, missing time, radio interference, all from this stretch of I-10, all following consistent patterns. He didn't know what the triangles were, didn't know where they came from or what they wanted. But he knew they were real. He knew they were methodical, and he knew they weren't finished. Whatever they were testing, measuring, studying, it was still ongoing. And Miles would be here watching, documenting, bearing witness. Because out here on this lonely stretch of highway, in the hours between midnight and dawn, something moved through the darkness. Something that stopped engines and erased time and left no shadows. Something that had been here for years and would probably be here for years more. Something that didn't want to be understood. Just observed. And Miles Rosado would keep observing. Because someone had to. Because the truth mattered. Even when the truth was impossible.